Across the frozen reaches of the Arctic and Antarctic, the logs guide you into the observation posts, radar rooms, and icebound watchtowers, where every flicker, echo, and shift was recorded. Follow the glints over Greenland's glaciers, track the subtle sonar distortions beneath the Arctic ridge, and witness the strange temporal anomalies in McMurdo's polar skies, moving through the same tension that gripped those who first encountered them. From submerged presences that defied instruments to fleeting lights above Thule, these declassified records reveal polar phenomena that resist explanation, each entry meticulously documented yet stubbornly unresolved. The radar contact that travelled beneath the ice, 1958. The Arctic Ocean in 1958 was still largely an unmeasured space, a ceiling of ice pressing down on water, whose depth charts were incomplete and whose acoustic behaviour was poorly understood, and it was within this environment that a US Navy submarine logged an encounter that would resist ordinary explanation. The year marked a turning point in polar operations, with nuclear propulsion allowing extended submerged travel beneath the ice for the first time, and that technological leap brought crews into regions where sonar behaved unpredictably and contact classification was uncertain. During one such under-ice transit, a radar and sonar track appeared that did not behave like ice, terrain, or any known vessel, and the log recorded its persistence with unusual care. The submarine at the centre of the incident was operating during the same period as Operation Sunshine, the Navy's effort to demonstrate under-ice capability and to collect scientific and navigational data in the Arctic Ocean. Nuclear power freed submarines from the need to surface, but it also meant crews relied entirely on instruments to interpret a world they could not see. Sonar was the primary sense, supplemented by upward-looking ice sonar and inertial navigation systems that were still experimental. Logs from this era show frequent annotations about false contacts caused by ice keels, pressure ridges, and thermal layers, which makes the attention given to this particular contact stand out. According to the Declassified patrol log, the contact was first detected not as a transient return but as a steady track beneath the ice canopy, appearing at a depth inconsistent with known ice formations. Sonar operators noted that the return moved independently of the submarine's course changes, holding relative position before accelerating away and then reappearing along a new bearing. Such behaviour was atypical for ice features, which usually produce static or slowly shifting echoes tied to the submarine's own motion. The crew recorded speed estimates that exceeded those associated with drifting ice or known under-ice debris, prompting repeated attempts at classification. The Arctic environment complicated every interpretation. Sound travels differently under ice, refracting along temperature and salinity gradients, and early nuclear submarines were still learning how to separate meaningful contacts from acoustic clutter. Even so, Navy manuals from the late 1950s describe specific criteria for dismissing false contacts, including erratic signal breakup and correlation with known ice maps. In this case, the log indicates that the contact maintained coherence across multiple sonar sweeps and was detected on more than one system, reducing the likelihood of a simple sensor artifact. The operators annotated the track rather than discarding it, a choice that suggests lingering uncertainty. What deepened the mystery was the contact's apparent response to the submarine's maneuvers. When the vessel altered course beneath the ice, the track shifted as well, maintaining a consistent separation for several minutes. This prompted the commanding officer to order speed changes and depth adjustments, standard procedures meant to test whether a contact was passive ice or an active object. Ice returns typically degrade under such conditions, yet the contact remained distinct before abruptly accelerating beyond the effective tracking range. The log does not speculate on intent, only noting the sequence of maneuvers and responses. In 1958, the presence of foreign submarines in the high Arctic was considered unlikely. The Soviet Navy had not yet demonstrated comparable under-ice endurance, and diesel-electric boats would have faced severe limitations in such an environment. Intelligence assessments of the period, later declassified, reflect confidence that the United States held a temporary advantage beneath the polar ice. This context mattered because it narrowed the range of plausible explanations available to the crew. A foreign vessel operating undetected under the ice would have represented a strategic surprise, yet the contact's performance did not match known submarine capabilities of the era. The patrol log also references attempts to correlate the sonar track with bathymetric data, an important step given the poorly mapped Arctic seabed. Features such as the Lomonosov Ridge were only partially understood at the time, and unexpected returns could sometimes be explained by underwater topography. However, the contact's movement did not align with fixed terrain, appearing at varying depths and bearings over a relatively short interval. The absence of any corresponding charted feature was noted explicitly, suggesting the crew had already considered and discounted a geological explanation. Notably, the encounter did not trigger an immediate abort or emergency report, which might be expected if the crew believed they were shadowed by a hostile vessel. Instead, the log treats the event as an unresolved anomaly, recorded carefully and then folded into the broader mission documentation. This restraint aligns with the Navy practice of the period, which emphasised detailed logging over speculation. The fact that the entry remained intact through later declassification reviews implies it was never conclusively explained or reclassified under another category. Subsequent analyses of under-ice operations, published decades later in Navy and scientific journals, acknowledged that early sonar systems sometimes produced complex echoes due to ice geometry and water layering, yet these same analyses also emphasize that experienced operators could usually distinguish between environmental noise and coherent contacts. The 1958 log reflects that experience, using measured language rather than alarm, while still marking the track as unusual. The absence of a follow-up explanation in associated reports leaves the entry isolated, a single unresolved observation in an otherwise methodical record. The Cold War context adds another layer to the incident. Under-ice transits were not only technical experiments, but strategic demonstrations intended to show that submarines could operate undetected near the polar approaches to the Soviet Union. Any unexplained contact carried weight beyond immediate safety concerns, touching on assumptions about detection, concealment, and control in a new operational domain. That this particular encounter did not fit established categories made it unsettling in a quiet, procedural way, challenging confidence in both sensors and situational awareness beneath the ice. Over time, the patrol logs from 1958 have been cited in discussions of early Arctic operations as examples of the unknowns crews faced in an environment still being defined. Unlike later Cold War incidents, there are no corroborating intelligence reports, intercepted communications, or recovered material to close the narrative. The entry remains a fragment, bounded by routine navigation notes and system checks, its significance preserved only by the care with which it was written. It stands as a reminder that exploration and surveillance often reveal ambiguities rather than answers. Even now, with advanced sonar modelling and decades of under-ice experience, the specific conditions recorded in that log cannot be reconstructed with certainty. The contact beneath the ice in 1958 remains suspended between explanation and dismissal, documented but unresolved. A small anomaly embedded in the early history of polar operations that continues to invite quiet scrutiny rather than confident conclusions. Somewhere beneath the Arctic ice, whatever produced that measured sonar track slipped back into silence, leaving only a few lines of ink to suggest it was ever there at all. The Greenland Air Defense Scramble, 1962. In the early 1960s, Greenland was no longer just ice and rock on a map but a forward edge of continental defence, watched continuously by radar screens that rarely went quiet. The island's position placed it directly beneath the shortest air routes between North America and the Soviet Union, turning its frozen interior into a corridor of constant strategic concern. Radar stations, airfields, and support facilities were embedded into the landscape not for visibility, but for warning. It was within this tightly monitored environment that a brief, unresolved encounter unfolded in 1962, when an unidentified radar contact triggered a full air defense response and then vanished before it could be explained. From a chain of isolated installations stretching across frozen terrain, military personnel monitored the polar sky because geography dictated that any northern approach would arrive with little warning. Greenland's radar sites fed data into the broader North American Air Defense Command network, designed to detect incoming aircraft or missiles with only minutes to spare. Operators worked long shifts in controlled interiors, interpreting abstract shapes and moving lines that represented distant objects beyond visual range. The system relied on redundancy and confirmation, yet it also required rapid judgment when something failed to conform to expected patterns. Late one operational cycle, an unexpected return appeared on radar displays that resisted immediate classification despite routine cross-checks and recalibration. The contact did not resemble commercial traffic, which was sparse in the region, nor did it align with scheduled military flights. Weather interference was considered first, as polar radar was often affected by atmospheric conditions, but the return persisted longer than typical clutter. Operators attempted to refine the signal, adjusting parameters and consulting adjacent stations, yet the contact remained ambiguous rather than resolving into a known profile. Standard procedure demanded escalation not because certainty existed, but because uncertainty itself was treated as a potential threat within Cold War doctrine. Air defense protocols emphasized response over interpretation when time and distance narrowed decision windows. The radar contact was elevated through command channels, evaluated against threat criteria, and ultimately judged sufficient to warrant action. In that moment, the system behaved exactly as designed, prioritizing readiness over restraint in a region where reaction time was limited and consequences were assumed to be severe. Interceptor aircraft were ordered into motion with the understanding that they would be guided almost entirely by voices from the ground, rather than by what pilots could see. Greenland's weather and darkness often reduced visibility, making ground-controlled interception essential. Pilots launched knowing they might never visually acquire a target, relying instead on radar vectors transmitted from stations tracking the contact. The scramble reflected confidence in coordination rather than clarity about what lay ahead. As the aircraft climbed into polar airspace, radar readings fluctuated in ways that complicated intercept calculations without triggering any system failure alarms. The contact's reported position shifted subtly, producing updates that required frequent correction. Speed and altitude estimates did not settle into a consistent pattern, forcing controllers to revise guidance repeatedly. Nothing about the radar behavior suggested a malfunction, yet nothing about the data allowed for firm identification. Inside the cockpits, crews relied on instructions that shifted repeatedly as ground controllers attempted to reconcile inconsistent positional data. Pilots adjusted headings and altitude based on information that changed from minute to minute, a process that demanded discipline rather than improvisation. Fuel constraints and distance limited how long they could remain on station, adding pressure to an already uncertain pursuit. Despite the effort, no visual contact was reported, and no corresponding signal appeared on onboard instruments. Post-flight instrument checks revealed subtle anomalies in radar calibration logs that had gone unnoticed during the scramble itself. Engineers later noted that some of the radar signals recorded during the event displayed faint, irregular echoes, too brief and erratic to correspond with aircraft or known atmospheric phenomena. These anomalies did not trigger alarms in real time, and they were small enough to be dismissed under normal operating conditions, yet their pattern repeated across multiple stations. Analysts speculated that local geomagnetic fluctuations, coupled with polar atmospheric distortions, might explain part of the irregularities, though nothing fully accounted for the contact's apparent movement and disappearance. These technical traces became an obscure but intriguing footnote in the mission's otherwise routine records. Without warning, the radar track degraded and then dissolved, leaving no clear path of departure and no confirmed point of disappearance. One moment, the contact remained a concern requiring active interception, and the next, it no longer existed within the system's awareness. There was no indication of a conventional exit, no transition to known air corridors, and no clear explanation offered by immediate data. The sudden absence was as notable as the earlier persistence. The alert status was lowered methodically, aircraft were recalled, and the broader defense network resumed its steady surveillance posture. Recovery followed established routines, with crews returning to base and operators documenting the sequence of events. The system absorbed the anomaly without disruption, resetting to its constant state of readiness. Outwardly, nothing appeared changed, yet the record now contained an unresolved entry that resisted easy categorization. Beyond the immediate response, the incident occurred during a period when Greenland's radar network was undergoing rapid modernization, with overlapping systems sometimes producing conflicting data that still had to be treated as operationally valid. In the early 1960s, long-range radars in polar regions were being pushed beyond their original design parameters. Expected to track high-altitude bombers, while simultaneously filtering out atmospheric distortion unique to high latitudes. Training manuals from the era emphasized that ambiguous returns could not be ignored simply because they were inconvenient or poorly understood. As a result, operators were conditioned to act first and resolve uncertainty later, a doctrine that shaped how this particular contact was handled and why it progressed to a scramble rather than being dismissed at an early stage. In subsequent internal reviews, analysts documented the sequence of events carefully while avoiding definitive explanations that could not be supported by evidence. Declassified summaries from similar periods show that such incidents were often left unresolved when data proved insufficient. Analysts considered known sources of false returns, compared timelines, and evaluated system performance, but in some cases, no correction or reinterpretation was added. The absence of a conclusion did not imply negligence, only the limits of available information. Polar radar limitations were well understood by this time, yet the specific behavior of this contact did not align neatly with known atmospheric or technical distortions. Ionospheric effects, temperature inversions, and signal refraction were all familiar challenges, but they typically produced identifiable patterns. The 1962 event did not match those patterns cleanly, prompting cautious language rather than confident dismissal. It occupied an uncomfortable space between explanation and anomaly, acknowledged but unresolved. What remained in the record was not a narrative of interception or identification, but a demonstration of how quickly an advanced system could be mobilized against something it never fully grasped. The logs show a defense network reacting with speed and discipline to a perceived intrusion, then standing down without answers. The encounter did not alter policy or procedure, yet it lingered as an example of uncertainty within a structure built to eliminate it. In the cold arithmetic of air defense, not every alert ended with clarity. For a brief interval over Greenland, the warning systems behaved as though something tangible had entered the sky, even though nothing was ever confirmed to have passed through it. The Soviet Ice Station Disturbance, 1969. On a drifting ice floe far from the nearest permanent settlement, a small Soviet research station conducted measurements that would soon record anomalies beyond any expected pattern. The station, part of a network of temporary Arctic outposts, had been deployed to gather atmospheric, glaciological, and seismic data for both scientific and strategic purposes. In early 1969, the crew noted that routine readings occasionally showed irregularities, but one series of disturbances was unusual enough to merit separate detailed logs. Unlike transient ice shifts or minor instrument glitches, these readings suggested a pattern that neither the environment nor the station's operations could easily explain. The surrounding Arctic expanse was a frozen void, where visibility rarely extended beyond the horizon, and even radio contact depended on brief windows of atmospheric clarity. The station's small complement of scientists, engineers, and technicians relied on a delicate balance of observation, instrumentation, and cautious judgment. Outside, wind gusts swept over the ice with unpredictable intensity, creating pressure ridges and acoustic phenomena that could mimic equipment signals. Inside, every creak, hum, and vibration was carefully noted against these known environmental baselines, forming a framework through which anomalies could be discerned. Each day, station personnel followed a strict routine, calibrating instruments, taking seismic readings, and logging environmental conditions with meticulous care. Barometric pressure, ice thickness, and local temperatures were recorded multiple times per day, while magnetometers and acoustic sensors continuously monitored the surrounding ice and water. The logs reveal that the crew maintained rigid schedules, not only to produce consistent data, but also to detect anything that fell outside established norms. When anomalies arose, the juxtaposition of routine and irregularity became immediately evident. It was during one otherwise ordinary cycle that subtle vibrations and inexplicable thumps began appearing on seismic sensors, faint at first but persistent enough to attract attention. The readings were brief pulses, spaced irregularly over hours, sometimes repeating in clusters that did not correspond to wind gusts or ice cracking. Early analysis suggested nothing dangerous, yet the patterns were consistent enough to warrant deeper scrutiny. Crew members compared the pulses to prior datasets and noted that the magnitude of the signals exceeded that usually caused by frost heave or shifting flows. Observers inside the station reported hearing low-frequency hums and occasional echoes that seemed to emanate from the ice itself, though external inspection revealed nothing. Technicians traced wiring, verified generator operations, and confirmed that no machinery produced the sounds, leaving only the frozen landscape as a potential source. Logs detail that the hums varied in pitch and duration, sometimes aligning with the seismic pulses but occasionally occurring independently. The combination of subtle vibrations and audible anomalies created a pervasive unease, as though the environment itself was sending signals that resisted explanation. Efforts to reconcile the data included cross-checking multiple instruments and repeating measurements, yet the anomalies maintained consistency across independent systems. Acoustic sensors in separate modules recorded identical low-frequency pulses, while seismic monitors on opposite sides of the flow detected synchronous vibrations. The coherence of readings from devices that operated independently suggested that these were not instrument errors or isolated mechanical interferences. Every new attempt to verify the anomalies only reinforced the impression that some external phenomenon, as yet unidentified, was interacting with the station. The station's instrumentation included early magnetometers and acoustic arrays designed to detect shifts in ice mass and underwater movement, which had been refined from earlier Arctic expeditions. Engineers meticulously documented calibration procedures, noting sensitivity to temperature fluctuations and mechanical drift in extreme cold. In the logs, these details underline that the anomalies could not be easily attributed to sensor error. Multiple independent devices registered similar patterns in different modules, and comparisons with prior seasonal data failed to yield any precedent. This layer of redundancy illustrates how seriously the crew approached verification, highlighting that the disturbances were recorded by well-maintained, reliable systems rather than by chance or faulty equipment. As hours turned into days, the disturbances intensified in irregular patterns, prompting crews to document every occurrence with timestamps and environmental notes. The logs detail how instruments showed sporadic but measurable shifts in ice movement or resonance, often accompanied by faint sounds perceptible only in quiet conditions. Even minor anomalies were recorded in separate binders, with every observation referenced to corresponding temperature, wind, and pressure data. The cumulative weight of these entries reflected both the crew's discipline and the stubbornly unexplained nature of the activity. Standard scientific protocols dictated careful observation and conservative interpretation, even as the simultaneous readings across instruments defied conventional explanations. The station's leaders resisted speculation, instead ensuring that every unusual occurrence was verified through repetition and peer review within the small crew. Entries consistently emphasize methodical measurement over conjecture, and the logs show that uncertainty was acknowledged explicitly. In this environment, recording the unknown was considered as important as documenting the known, providing a permanent account even when answers could not be determined. Outside, the polar environment added complexity. Drifting flows shifted under high winds, snowstorms obscured line-of-sight observations, and ice cracking produced familiar yet distinct acoustic signatures. Crews were trained to recognize these ordinary signals and differentiate them from anomalies, yet the 1969 disturbances frequently overlapped with expected environmental sounds, creating ambiguity that challenged even experienced personnel. The combination of harsh conditions and isolation heightened attention to detail, as any unexplained pattern could represent an opportunity to understand the ice's hidden behaviors, or perhaps an entirely unrecognized phenomenon. Despite considering natural phenomena such as frost heave, ice fracturing, or mechanical vibrations from generators, none of these accounted for the exact timing and character of the recorded events. Each proposed explanation was compared against multiple instruments and cross-checked with weather logs and nearby observation reports. The records indicate that the anomalies persisted even under conditions that should have neutralized known environmental factors, leaving the crew with phenomena that were real, measurable, and yet defied conventional understanding. Years later, declassified logs revealed the methodical detail with which every sensor anomaly and personal observation had been catalogued, yet the cause remained unassigned. Analysts reviewing the records noted the unusual coherence of readings across instruments and the consistency of documentation by multiple personnel. These logs provide a rare window into Arctic research operations, demonstrating both the precision of Soviet scientific procedures and the enduring presence of unexplained occurrences. No supplementary reports, photographs, or corroborating evidence ever clarified the nature of the disturbance. For all other operations, temperature measurements, atmospheric readings, and scientific experiments, the station functioned without interruption, leaving the disturbances as isolated, inexplicable entries in otherwise routine records. The rest of the Arctic mission proceeded according to plan, emphasizing that the anomaly did not represent equipment failure, structural instability, or environmental crisis, but instead stood apart as a quiet, unresolved puzzle. The crew's careful, methodical work ensured that the phenomenon was preserved in detail, even as it resisted interpretation. Whatever passed through that frozen expanse left only traces in the station's instruments, as though the ice itself had whispered a secret no one could fully decipher. The Antarctic sound that would not fade, 1974. A persistent, unidentifiable hum had begun to dominate the station's hydrophone recordings, refusing to fade despite repeated calibrations and tests. Personnel aboard the research vessel and nearby submersibles recorded the same tonal resonance across multiple instruments, noting its consistency and duration. Unlike typical background noise, which often fluctuated or dissipated quickly, this sound maintained an unbroken quality, lingering through every cycle of observation. Logs from early 1974 indicate that the signal persisted across several operational periods, intriguing scientists and technicians who had grown accustomed to the irregular and predictable chaos of polar acoustic conditions. Technicians debated whether the signal could be dismissed as electrical interference, yet comparison with earlier recordings suggested it was something entirely distinct. Multiple hydrophones registered nearly identical frequency ranges, and the phenomenon persisted even after instruments were recalibrated and repositioned. Engineers carefully documented each verification step, recording sensitivity thresholds and cross-referencing previous data to rule out mechanical or electronic artifacts. The more rigorously the instruments were checked, the more apparent it became that the anomaly was real, measurable, and external to the station's equipment. The crew, accustomed to hours of routine observation, quickly realized that the sound's tonal quality bore no resemblance to ice cracking, hull vibrations, or marine wildlife. While common Antarctic noises had been thoroughly catalogued, this hum carried a persistent, layered resonance, almost melodic in its consistency, yet entirely alien in origin. Personnel noted subtle variations in harmonics that did not align with any known natural or mechanical source. Even seasoned hydrographers, experienced in isolating environmental acoustic patterns, found themselves uncertain, compelled to treat each instance as significant while resisting premature conclusions. During each monitoring shift, the hum reverberated through water and steel alike, producing a sensation that seemed to surround the crew from all directions. Acoustic readings suggested that the sound propagated efficiently through different water layers, reflecting off submerged ice ridges and diffusing unpredictably under the ice shelves. Observers described the effect as a persistent vibration that seemed both near and far, as if the entire surrounding medium had become a conductor for some unseen force. Replays of recordings confirm the clarity and structure of the tone, reinforcing its mysterious persistence. Researchers meticulously logged every occurrence, noting time, amplitude, and directional hints, conscious that any lapse could obscure critical data. Observers coordinated across shifts to ensure continuity of monitoring, integrating details such as water temperature, ice movement, and wind speed to contextualize the phenomenon. Each event was catalogued with attention to environmental and instrumental variables, producing a thorough record intended to withstand later scrutiny. The crew's methodical approach emphasized precision and reliability, leaving no room for subjective interpretation or speculative commentary. Independent hydrophone arrays corroborated the anomaly across multiple sites, confirming that it was not an isolated instrument error or a localized phenomenon. Signals appeared with near-synchronous frequency patterns on arrays separated by hundreds of meters, and similar detections were reported from adjacent research vessels. This redundancy eliminated the possibility of a single-device artifact, and suggested that the phenomenon extended across a broader spatial range than initially anticipated. Such coherence between instruments was unusual in the dynamic, acoustically complex Antarctic environment, highlighting the sound's singularity. Historical context of the equipment underscored the anomaly's significance. The hydrophones and long-range sonar systems were derived from early Cold War-era acoustic research and had been refined for extreme polar conditions. Operators noted their sensitivity to temperature gradients, salinity, and ice cover, meaning that the instruments could detect even subtle shifts in underwater sound propagation. Crew logs described careful procedures for calibrating the arrays, including repeated baseline recordings before and after each deployment. The fact that multiple arrays using independent calibration methods captured the same untraceable hum reinforced both the reliability of the measurements and the extraordinary nature of the phenomenon. These technical details emphasize that the sound was recorded by highly controlled, precise instruments, rather than being an artifact of faulty equipment or operator error. Cross-referencing environmental factors, including storms, ice shifts, and water currents, yielded no clear explanation for the sound. Acoustic modelling indicated that natural phenomena could not produce consistent frequency or amplitude over time. Every known source, from ice cracking to tidal motion, fell short of accounting for the anomaly's persistence. Scientists noted that even subtle background variations in water salinity or temperature could not replicate the pattern, leaving the origin entirely unresolved. The data emphasized that the phenomenon was not only real, but systematically defied conventional explanation. Even established acoustic events, from tectonic tremors to marine life vocalizations, were insufficient to account for the resonance. Whales, seals, and other large marine mammals could not generate frequencies or durations that matched the recorded sound. Seismic events in the region were absent during the recordings, and the vessel's mechanical operations had been logged meticulously, with no correlation to the anomaly. Analysts later observed that each potential explanation fell short of matching the combination of clarity, continuity, and propagation, underscoring the hum's extraordinary nature. Over several consecutive days, the hum remained detectable, appearing at irregular intervals yet maintaining its recognizable structure. Crew members noted that periods of apparent silence were invariably followed by a resurgence, as if the sound possessed its own rhythm independent of environmental triggers. Extended monitoring shifts were organized to capture every instance, and submersibles were deployed in an effort to triangulate its origin beneath ice shelves. Despite repeated attempts, no physical source was ever located, leaving the crew with a persistent and unexplained auditory phenomenon that dominated their operational awareness. Each recording was archived with precise environmental, positional, and instrumental data, forming a detailed chronicle of the anomaly's behavior. Logs included coordinates, depth, temperature, ice movement, and atmospheric readings, creating a comprehensive dataset for later analysis. This attention to detail allowed analysts to reconstruct the event with remarkable fidelity decades later, even though the source remained unidentified. The care with which these observations were recorded reflects both the professionalism of the crew and the singular nature of the phenomenon, preserved in detail despite its elusiveness. Generations later, declassified files reveal the full scope of the observations, demonstrating a sound that persisted across multiple locations, instruments, and operational conditions without explanation. Analysts noted the uniformity of the recordings and the consistency with which different teams observed the hum, yet even modern acoustic modelling could not resolve its origin. The documentation emphasizes that while the Antarctic environment is full of predictable, measurable noise, this resonance resisted classification, leaving a lingering impression on both personnel and later reviewers of the logs. While all other underwater signals behaved predictably, this hum remained a persistent, enigmatic presence, detectable yet utterly untraceable. Its behaviour did not conform to expectations for either environmental or man-made sources, and its continuity defied all known acoustic principles. The phenomenon remained an enduring puzzle, a sound that existed as evidence without form, leaving those who monitored it with a sense of unresolved awe and quiet unease. Time passed. The hum persisted in recordings alone, a testament to a presence that could be measured but never seen, echoing through waters that no human could fully trace. The Thule Watchtower sighting, 1956. The Thule Watchtower rose against the pale Arctic sky, its narrow windows framing a frozen expanse where routine observation had long lulled the crew into a sense of predictable monotony. From their vantage point high above the ice, personnel scanned the horizon for aircraft, weather phenomena, and the occasional distant ship navigating the frigid waters. The region's vast emptiness had made observation both monotonous and vital, as the United States Air Force maintained a keen watch over its northernmost base in 1956. It was within this quiet routine that the extraordinary would appear, briefly transforming a familiar landscape into something unrecognisable. Shifts were measured in meticulous intervals, binoculars trained over ice fields, and logs maintained with precision, every detail meant to capture what the Arctic could reveal or conceal. Personnel rotated through day and night watches, noting wind direction, cloud cover, ice drift, and even the faint shimmer of distant sunlight reflecting off frozen surfaces. The meticulous nature of the work created a rhythm in which nothing went unrecorded, ensuring that any anomaly, no matter how fleeting, would be documented. The crew's discipline, honed for survival and operational efficiency, would prove essential when the anomaly emerged. The air was brittle and thin, carrying an almost imperceptible vibration that made the distant horizon shimmer, distorting both light and perception. Low winter sun combined with atmospheric refraction created optical illusions that could deceive even the most practiced eye, and the landscape itself, intersecting ridges of ice and snow, often played tricks on depth perception. Observers had learned to differentiate between mirages, glints from ice crystals and distant aircraft. But this day presented conditions that would challenge those distinctions. The Arctic seemed to hold its breath, and the stage was set for a sighting that would linger in official records for decades. It was during one of these long, disciplined watches that a glint appeared, moving against the wind in a manner that seemed to defy any conventional explanation. Initially subtle, the object caught the edge of a watchman's vision, a fleeting flash of reflected light. Moments later it reappeared, this time clearly moving across the horizon with deliberate fluid motion. Its trajectory was unlike anything the observers had catalogued, accelerating and decelerating in ways that no aircraft or balloon could replicate. For a brief span, the watchtower crew witnessed something that existed on the border between reality and uncertainty. Officers and enlisted personnel alike froze at the sight, instinctively comparing angles, distances and trajectories, yet finding nothing that matched known aircraft or environmental phenomena. Orders to document rather than speculate were followed with military precision, but eyes remained fixed on the horizon, tracing movement and direction. Even as pens scratched across logbooks and cameras were readied, the observers felt a tension unique to witnessing the unexplainable in real time, a mixture of discipline, disbelief, and awe. Binoculars and early optical rangefinders were brought to bear, calibrated for the Arctic's unique light conditions, revealing subtle nuances in the object's shape and motion that sketches alone could not capture. Observers meticulously recorded angular measurements, estimated velocity and approximate distance using triangulation from multiple vantage points. Notes were made on atmospheric distortion, ice reflection, and low-angle sunlight, all of which could influence perception. These procedures underscored that the sighting was not casual or anecdotal. It was examined with military rigour, blending observation, calculation, and documentation in real time. The combination of independent verification, precise measurements, and immediate log entries reinforced the credibility of the encounter while preserving the sense of mystery surrounding the object. Cold seeped into fingers and optics alike, making every careful measurement and sketch a test of endurance as the anomaly persisted long enough to be recorded in detail. The Arctic wind bit sharply at exposed skin, and lenses fogged or iced over, threatening accuracy in observation. Yet personnel maintained composure, producing precise sketches and detailed notes on shape, movement and lighting. They captured the anomaly as faithfully as humanly possible, preserving the fleeting moment against the constant erasure of time and weather. Simultaneously, instruments at nearby meteorological posts registered subtle, unanticipated fluctuations in barometric pressure and radiostatic, which seemed to coincide with the object's movements. While not initially recognised as linked to the sighting, these anomalies were logged automatically by sensitive environmental monitoring equipment, including early warning signal detectors and magnetic field sensors. Engineers later noted that the fluctuations occurred in brief pulses, mirroring the object's shifts in speed and direction observed visually. The readings were too small to trigger alarms, yet they were consistent across multiple instruments, suggesting a real, albeit unexplained, physical effect. Analysts speculated that these could have resulted from minor atmospheric ionization or geomagnetic disturbances unique to the high Arctic, though none fully accounted for the observed motion or optical characteristics, adding an additional layer of factual mystery to the event. A second watchtower reported a similar observation, corroborating the sighting independently and forcing a cautious reassessment of what had been dismissed as a fleeting illusion. The corroboration lent credibility to the encounter, showing that it was not a single observer's misperception. Communication between the posts was immediate and precise, following military protocol, yet the excitement beneath the procedural surface was palpable. The phenomenon was no longer a private curiosity, it was a verified occurrence demanding explanation. Speculation followed rapidly: aurora, reflections, weather balloons, distant reconnaissance planes, but each explanation faltered when measured against the sharpness, speed, and behavior of the object. Aurora activity was minimal and stationary. Balloons would drift slowly and predictably. Aircraft in the area could be accounted for through flight logs. None matched the recorded trajectory or intermittent acceleration. The object's behavior defied conventional understanding, leaving observers to document what they could while admitting, even in writing, that its origin remained unknown. Every detail was meticulously logged: time, bearing, shape, estimated size, and notes on atmospheric conditions, forming a record that reflected both diligence and uncertainty. Observers recorded environmental cues, light levels, wind direction, horizon clarity, and included sketches that represented perceived dimensions and movement. These logs would later serve as official reports, preserved within declassified military files, showing that even within a structured operational framework, the unknown could intrude without warning or resolution. In the days that followed, the personnel could not fully shake the encounter, revisiting sketches and logs during quiet moments, aware that the event had left a subtle imprint on their perception of the Arctic. Discussions were carefully muted in official settings, but informal conversations hinted at lingering curiosity and unease. Some crew members revisited the site from alternate angles, searching for residual signs, while others pored over photographs and instrument readings, hoping for confirmation or rationalization that never came. Declassified reports decades later reveal the sighting's consistency and verification, yet analysts could only confirm what was recorded, leaving the source of the anomaly unresolved. Files show precise bearings, timings, and corroborated sketches, yet the object remained unidentified. Historians and analysts reviewing these documents emphasized the rigor of observation and the impossibility of explaining the phenomenon through known environmental or man-made sources. The documentation, though thorough, preserved a mystery as stubborn as the Arctic ice itself. Though operational procedures resumed without incident, the memory of the fleeting, unexplainable movement lingered in logs, sketches, and the minds of those who had watched it unfold. Personnel returned to standard watches, following schedules and reporting protocols, but the event had subtly reshaped their perception of the horizon. The Arctic, long predictable in its monotony, had briefly revealed something entirely beyond expectation, leaving a trace in human memory and official record alike. It vanished as silently as it had appeared, leaving only the careful recordings behind, a frozen moment of uncertainty etched into the endless Arctic horizon. The British Survey Team's Restricted Entry, 1982. The survey team approached a vast, unbroken plateau, where their maps hinted at traversable terrain, yet subtle markers suggested the area was off-limits. From the base camp to the far horizon, the ice stretched uninterrupted, pale and almost featureless under the high-latitude sun. But even in the monotony of white, the team could sense the authority of the boundary ahead. Historical records of British Antarctic operations noted that this sector, though charted, had restricted zones to protect sensitive installations or environmental hazards, a detail that now lent an unspoken gravity to the expedition. The frozen expanse felt simultaneously inviting and forbidding, and each step toward it was measured with professional caution. Equipment was checked and double-checked, from compasses and theodolites to early ice-penetrating radar and portable weather stations, ensuring that every tool was prepared for the unforgiving conditions. Vehicles were inspected for fuel leaks, engines calibrated for sub-zero temperatures, and radio transmitters tested for the long-range communication required in remote polar regions. Survival gear, including insulated suits, stoves, and emergency shelters, was arranged for rapid deployment. Even minor miscalculations could have catastrophic consequences in the Antarctic, and the surveyors understood that meticulous preparation was not only prudent, it was essential to survival and success. Blizzards swept unpredictably across the horizon, and the low-angle sun created shifting shadows that distorted the contours of ice ridges, snowfields, and hidden crevasses beneath them. The team noted that the wind could suddenly change direction, whipping loose snow into a haze that reduced visibility to a few meters. Equipment needed constant attention. Frost accumulated on lenses and dials, and compass needles sometimes wavered in local magnetic anomalies. The dynamic environment heightened tension with every mile traversed, amplifying the sense that the plateau itself was resisting intrusion and that any further approach carried unknown risks. A series of stakes, warning signs, and faint barricades soon appeared, their presence deliberate yet unexplained, forbidding further passage into the region. Some markers were simple wooden posts, others flagged with reflective tape, all positioned with military-like precision. In addition to human-made obstacles, subtle natural features, steep ice cliffs and deep snow chasms reinforced the boundary. The team carefully documented the markers, aware that official instructions left no room for misinterpretation. Entry was prohibited, and the reasons, though unstated, were treated as serious and binding. The team paused, exchanging notes and recalibrating instruments, uncertain whether the restriction was a safety measure, a territorial boundary, or something more unusual. Discussions were cautious and formal. Officers cross-referenced maps, historical records, and prior expedition logs to determine any legitimate rationale for the closure. Some speculated it might relate to classified experiments, hidden infrastructure, or environmental hazards not publicly disclosed. Each hypothesis was weighed carefully, yet the true reason remained a mystery, heightening a sense of unease among even the most experienced personnel. Careful navigation along jagged ice ridges and windswept slopes revealed no clear passage. Each potential route was blocked either by natural formations or by official markers. Crevasses twisted unpredictably beneath snow bridges, and seemingly minor depressions could conceal dangerous voids. The surveyors attempted multiple angles, triangulating their position from vantage points and cross-checking measurements, yet the boundary persisted unbroken. Instruments confirmed the line as both tangible and unyielding, leaving the team with precise documentation of an impenetrable yet invisible restriction. Strange formations in the ice and subtle patterns on the snow hinted at unusual conditions just beyond the restricted line, though their origin could not be verified. Smooth, polished ice areas contrasted sharply with ridged or fractured surfaces, suggesting previous disturbances that did not fit natural glacial patterns. In some areas, faint depressions suggested prior human activity, but there was no definitive evidence of structures or installations. Photographs, sketches, and meticulous written records were made, preserving these observations for future analysis, though the ultimate explanation remained elusive. A closer inspection with hand lenses and portable spectrometers revealed unusual mineral deposits and ice crystallization patterns along the edges of the boundary, distinct from surrounding formations. The team meticulously documented differences in texture, density, and reflectivity, noting areas where the ice appeared to have been artificially compacted or altered by unknown forces. Even the slightest variations in snow accumulation were recorded, suggesting airflow anomalies or subtle geothermal activity beneath the surface. Though no definitive explanation could be drawn, the findings added layers of mystery, implying that the region's restrictions were supported not only by policy but perhaps by phenomena beyond conventional understanding. Detailed logs recorded every marker, slope, and anomaly, forming a comprehensive account of both the physical and procedural barriers encountered. Each entry included precise coordinates, time-stamped environmental readings, temperature, wind direction, and sun angles, capturing the unique Arctic conditions. The surveyors noted the subtle interplay of shadow, reflection, and surface irregularity, ensuring that even transient or fleeting observations were not lost. This attention to detail emphasized the rigor and credibility of the survey, while preserving the sense of mystery surrounding the restricted area. Debates over possible explanations arose among the team: military limitations, environmental hazards, scientific secrecy, or phenomena unknown to conventional understanding. Each scenario was considered against the physical evidence and prior knowledge of Antarctic geography. Military restrictions could account for barriers near strategic zones, while scientific tests could explain unexplored or sensitive areas, yet neither fully explained the precision and placement of markers. The team's deliberations revealed a professional tension between curiosity and protocol, underscoring that sometimes the unknown is preserved by design. Uncertainty weighed heavily on the group, as the inability to enter the restricted zone tested both professional discipline and human instinct. The isolation of the plateau, the monotony of the landscape, and the constant vigilance required for safety amplified a subtle anxiety. Even minor anomalies, an oddly smooth ice patch, a reflective glint or a sudden gust of wind, were noted and mentally catalogued. The tension was not dramatic but persistent, a quiet pressure that made each observation and decision more significant than the preceding ones. Subsequent review of satellite imagery, aerial reconnaissance, and official survey data corroborated the team's meticulous logs, yet the rationale for the restriction remained unclear. Analysts confirmed that the terrain beyond the markers was unusual in its composition and accessibility, but no official explanation has ever been made public. Declassified documents show verification of the team's account, but the purpose of the restriction, whether military, environmental, or otherwise, remains unresolved, leaving the boundary as enigmatic as it was in 1982. Even as their mission continued elsewhere, the memory of the impassable line lingered, a silent reminder of limits neither physical nor fully comprehensible. The surveyors completed subsequent tasks with professional precision, yet informal discussions frequently returned to the mystery of the restricted area. Maps and photographs preserved a tangible record of the encounter, yet, in the absence of explanation, the boundary retained its power to intrigue and unsettle. The Antarctic, so often defined by measurable extremes, had briefly presented something entirely outside comprehension, leaving its mark on those who had approached it. The surveyors turned back, leaving the area untouched, a frozen border that whispered of secrets beyond reach and would continue to do so for decades. The submerged contact near the Lomonosov Ridge, 1977. The sonar operators held a tense silence as the research vessel approached the Lomonosov Ridge, a remote undersea mountain chain in the Arctic basin that few expeditions had surveyed in detail. Currents here were unpredictable, layered with extreme temperature and salinity gradients that distorted acoustic signals, making the detection of objects a challenge even for the most experienced crew. The ridge's isolation had long drawn scientific interest for both geology and oceanography, but the expedition's logs would later reveal that this survey uncovered something entirely unexpected, a submerged presence that moved against the known behaviour of Arctic waters. Every instrument aboard the vessel had been painstakingly calibrated for operation in sub-zero temperatures, including hull-mounted sonar transducers, analog depth gauges, and portable signal processors. Crew members reviewed operational protocols and prepared survival equipment, aware that even minor malfunctions in these harsh conditions could jeopardize the mission. Redundant recording systems were tested continuously, ensuring that any anomalous detection would be captured in multiple forms. Officers emphasized meticulous documentation. In these waters, a single oversight could obscure an anomaly that might never appear again. A sharp echo appeared on one of the sonar consoles, sudden and persistent. The object remained at a depth inconsistent with ice keels or known submarine operations, and moved in a manner that defied natural current patterns. Its reflection characteristics were unlike the surrounding seafloor, and its persistence over successive scans drew immediate attention from both officers and technical staff. Sensors picked up subtle variations in speed and direction that could not be explained by turbulence, marine life, or instrumentation error. Each observer sensed the anomaly was something beyond routine detection. Technicians conducted multiple verification passes, adjusting frequency ranges and the angles of the sonar beams to rule out interference or false readings. Echo returns were measured against known signatures of ice formations, seabed rock, and documented naval submarines. Each pass confirmed the anomaly's presence, producing readings that were remarkably consistent despite the distortions caused by Arctic water layers. The logs emphasized the unusual behavior of the contact, noting that no object of comparable size and movement had ever been recorded in these coordinates. Acoustic signals in these waters were notoriously unpredictable. Temperature layers, salinity gradients, and fluctuating current velocities bent sound waves in unexpected ways, producing distortions that could mimic object movement. The anomaly, however, persisted through all these variables, appearing in every sweep regardless of changes in vessel speed, sonar angle, or environmental conditions. Crew members began to realize that the object's detection was not a coincidence, and that its pattern of movement, though subtle, suggested intelligent or otherwise non-random behavior, unlike anything they had previously catalogued. Over the course of several hours, the object exhibited distinct changes in trajectory. It shifted position abruptly against the current and slowed in areas where water pressure and density suggested movement would be more difficult. Officers estimated size and relative velocity, logging each observation with precision. These readings indicated a consistency that suggested a physical presence, rather than a natural anomaly or fleeting sonar artifact. Crew discussions reflected both professional caution and a growing unease, as the anomaly's behavior refused to match anything in naval or geological records. Specialized bathymetric mapping instruments detected subtle depressions and acoustic shadows along the ridge floor, coinciding with the object's path. The crew noted areas where the seafloor appeared disturbed, as if the contact's movement generated microturbulence or displaced sediment in ways that sonar alone could not fully explain. Thermocline shifts and variations in salinity near these spots were logged, hinting at localized disturbances. While the crew could not directly visualize these effects, the data suggested that the anomaly interacted physically with its surroundings, leaving traces that were measurable but invisible, deepening the mystery of an entity moving beneath the Arctic ice. Additional sensors registered brief, localized magnetic anomalies along the path, subtle shifts that seemed to align with the object's movement rather than random geomagnetic fluctuations. The readings, recorded by high-sensitivity magnetometers and corroborated by gravity meters, indicated minute distortions in the Earth's field over the ridge floor. Scientists aboard speculated that these could result from a dense metallic composition or an object exerting a localized influence on surrounding water currents. While too minor to pose navigational hazards, the anomalies persisted across multiple passes and matched the acoustic data's timing and trajectory. These secondary measurements, logged alongside sonar echoes and sediment displacement, strengthened the case that the contact was a coherent physical entity rather than an artifact of instrumentation or environmental noise, adding another layer of verified strangeness to the expedition's findings. The team meticulously recorded every variable: depth measurements, sonar reflections, estimated dimensions, and the pattern of movement relative to the vessel. Each notation was cross-checked against previous passes, creating a comprehensive dataset that captured both the object's persistence and unpredictability. Even the smallest irregularities in sonar echoes were documented, providing analysts with layers of data that would later be reviewed against historical naval logs. The process emphasized both the professionalism of the crew and the extraordinary nature of the discovery. Submersible units and tethered probes were launched to attempt visual confirmation, but sonar shadows and ice cover interfered with direct observation. Mechanical deployment was further complicated by the region's unpredictable currents, which shifted equipment unexpectedly and distorted the sonar beam paths. Despite these challenges, the object's presence was consistently recorded, though the team could not approach it closely. This frustrating limitation underscored both the technological challenges of Arctic exploration and the anomaly's elusiveness. Comparisons with known submarines, geological formations, and iceberg signatures yielded no satisfactory explanation. Acoustic patterns, directional movement, and the object's persistence defied categorization. Analysts considered natural seafloor features, previously mapped wrecks, and even rare marine life, but none matched the recorded behavior. The anomaly remained unidentified, and the crew confronted the reality that they had discovered something genuinely unaccounted for, documented meticulously yet still resisting explanation. Detailed analysis of echo signatures revealed anomalous frequency reflections that did not correspond to any known materials or structures. certain sonar returns were stronger than anticipated for objects of comparable size, hinting at unusual density or composition. Combined with erratic movement against current patterns, these measurements indicated the object might be constructed of materials or shaped in ways that challenged conventional understanding. Every new data point increased both fascination and unease, leaving no clear path toward rational explanation. Declassified Soviet naval files later verified the contact, confirming its persistence across multiple observation sessions, though all details concerning its origin and purpose were redacted. Analysts reviewing these records noted the anomaly's behavior as consistent with the expedition logs, yet the object's identity remained elusive. Official acknowledgement validated the crew's observations, yet simultaneously amplified the mystery. Even the naval authorities could not explain, leaving the object's nature open to speculation. Despite meticulous measurements and careful recording, the object defied categorization. Its movement, acoustic signature, and persistence all suggested an intentional presence, yet no known technology or natural formation could account for it. Crew members later reflected that even after detailed post-mission analysis, the anomaly remained unexplainable. Its existence challenged both operational expectations and the limits of Arctic exploration, leaving the Lomonosov Ridge with a secret that persisted in silence beneath the ice-dark depths. Beneath the frozen Arctic waters, the object endured silently, leaving only faint sonar traces as evidence of a presence that no one could fully understand. The Alaskan Early Warning Anomaly, 1961. The radar screens flickered to life in the Arctic night, displaying a series of blips that seemed impossible for the region and season. The small early warning station, perched on a ridge overlooking the frozen tundra, was part of a network designed to detect incoming aircraft during the height of Cold War tensions. Operators, accustomed to routine sweeps and occasional false readings, recognized immediately that this was unlike anything previously logged. The blips appeared in rapid succession, moving with a speed and precision that challenged the known capabilities of contemporary aircraft. Yet no reports from adjacent stations corroborated the readings. Outside, temperatures plummeted and winds swept across the frozen tundra. Yet inside the station, every operator's attention was fixed on the mysterious readings. The bitter Arctic night imposed physical strain on the crew, with frost forming at window edges and metal panels contracting audibly in the cold. Inside, the warmth of the radar room contrasted sharply with the harsh elements, but the intensity of the situation left no time for comfort. Operators rotated in shifts, eyes fixed on oscilloscopes and plotting boards, noting each anomalous movement with painstaking detail. Every routine task was overshadowed by the growing realization that something unusual was unfolding. One blip moved at an altitude and speed inconsistent with any aircraft known to the early warning network, drawing murmured speculation among the crew. The radar signature was unusually sharp and consistent, defying explanations such as atmospheric mirages or migrating flocks of birds. Its course appeared deliberate, tracing a path across sectors normally considered empty. Officers immediately marked the anomaly in the log, noting that conventional flight paths or known training exercises could not account for its trajectory. The discrepancy was striking, and the silence that followed each observation made the air in the station almost tangible, heavy with anticipation. Technicians immediately began cross-checking the signal, consulting charts, verifying calibration, and repeating sweeps to eliminate any chance of instrument error. Every radar dish was recalibrated, each oscillator adjusted to account for potential drift, and multiple operators ran parallel recordings to ensure redundancy. The crew followed strict protocols, knowing that even a minor misalignment could create illusions of movement where none existed. Each repetition confirmed the presence of the anomaly. As the readings persisted across multiple systems, the possibility of an internal technical fault diminished, leaving the operators with only one conclusion: the blip was real. Auroral activity lit the night sky, causing subtle geomagnetic interference that complicated interpretation, yet the anomaly persisted on every adjusted frequency. Green and purple curtains of light shimmered through the horizon, a visual reminder of the unique environmental challenges in Alaska. Geomagnetic storms were known to affect radar performance, producing false echoes and unexpected reflections. but the operators meticulously compared the anomaly's signature against these known interference patterns. The object's blips remained consistent and coherent, unaffected by the auroral fluctuations, suggesting that it was unaffected by environmental noise and moving independently of natural interference. The contact appeared again hours later, emerging from a sector previously thought empty, defying all predictive models for aircraft or natural phenomena. The radar logs recorded multiple passes, each with slightly altered paths but always exhibiting a controlled, deliberate motion. Even as the crew attempted to anticipate its route using historical data and known flight corridors, the anomaly avoided every predicted intercept. Its sudden reappearances amplified concern among the operators, many of whom had been trained to remain calm under stress, but now experienced an unprecedented sense of uncertainty. Operators debated procedures, weighing the urgency of reporting against the possibility of false alarm, aware that any misstep could have severe strategic consequences. They considered invoking standard alert protocols, which would have escalated the readings to regional command and potentially to NORAD headquarters. Yet without confirmation, they hesitated. Any premature report could trigger a chain reaction in an era where every unexplained radar signal was scrutinized as a potential military threat. The decision-making process itself became tense, a silent competition between caution and responsibility under the shadow of international scrutiny. Radar data revealed irregular motion patterns, with shifts in trajectory and speed that suggested neither natural drift nor conventional propulsion. Analysts examined every nuance: slight accelerations, subtle course corrections, and irregular pauses in movement. None of these could be replicated by aircraft or balloons known to the United States or Allied forces. Even high-altitude reconnaissance planes, designed for rapid Arctic navigation, could not match the anomaly's movement profile. The crew, despite rigorous training, began to consider that the object was exhibiting behavior outside known aeronautical physics. Messages were sent to command headquarters, carefully worded to report the anomaly while maintaining the secrecy required by Cold War protocol. Every phrase was scrutinized to avoid alarm while still conveying the unexpected persistence and unusual trajectory of the blip. Reports were sent through secure channels, emphasizing the anomaly's reliability on multiple instruments and the repeated confirmation across sweeps. Headquarters acknowledged receipt, issuing instructions to continue monitoring while refraining from alerting nearby stations. The balance of transparency and discretion reflected the stakes of reporting an unexplained phenomenon during heightened geopolitical tension. Crew members noticed a growing tension, the psychological weight of unexplained readings pressing heavily as hours passed without resolution. Operators, trained to distinguish patterns and anomalies, found themselves second-guessing their own eyes and instruments. Sleep deprivation and stress magnified the oddity of the signals, creating a sense of unease that spread silently through the station. Even routine tasks, such as logging readings and maintaining equipment, took on a heightened significance, as every error might obscure or misrepresent the anomaly's behavior. Historical records later confirmed the anomaly's repeated appearances, yet offered no clarification or explanation for the unusual activity. Archive logs and internal memos revealed that the radar blip had persisted over multiple nights, documented in official reports that remained classified for decades. These corroborated the operator's observations, indicating that the anomaly had been observed by more than one station and had eluded identification. The absence of any known aircraft or natural explanation in these corroborating records heightened the mystery and reinforced the credibility of the original accounts. Final sweeps recorded the blip disappearing into sectors beyond reliable radar coverage, leaving a trace in the data but no tangible identification. The anomaly faded gradually, leaving no wreckage, no visual confirmation, and no follow-up sightings. The operators completed their logs with meticulous precision, acknowledging that the blip had resisted every attempt at categorization. The combination of advanced instrumentation, repeated verification, and consistent behavior ensured that the anomaly could not be dismissed as error or illusion. Years following the event, the anomaly continued to puzzle analysts reviewing the records, a reminder that the Arctic frontier held phenomena that could not always be reconciled with human understanding. The readings remained a historical footnote in Cold War surveillance, but for the crew, the memory of the flickering blips and their unexplainable movements endured as a testament to the unknown lurking in remote high-stakes regions. The Arctic sky remained still and silent, but the records preserved a presence that neither explanation nor elapsed time could erase. The Antarctic Flight That Lost Time, 1979. The Lockheed C-130 lifted from McMurdo Station under a sky streaked with orange twilight, its mission routine yet poised for the unexpected. The crew consisted of a mix of military and civilian scientists tasked with surveying ice floes, taking atmospheric readings, and testing navigation equipment under extreme conditions. The first hours of flight were unremarkable, with instruments reporting standard readings and the pilots maintaining a steady altitude over the vast white expanse. Yet, as they crossed the latitudes where the continent's plateau rose sharply, subtle irregularities began to appear on the chronometers and plotting boards, discrepancies that would soon challenge the crew's understanding of time and navigation. Inside the cockpit, temperatures were controlled, but the tension among the crew grew as they adjusted instruments and confirmed fuel calculations over the vast ice below. The hum of the engines, normally reassuring, became a steady backdrop to heightened scrutiny of every gauge. Flight engineers noted fluctuations in altimeters that seemed small but inconsistent with the aircraft's steady climb. Navigators double-checked wind speed data and GPS coordinates, conscious that even a minor miscalculation in these latitudes could result in significant course deviation. The combination of frigid isolation and mounting uncertainty created a tangible weight, pressing on the crew as hours stretched across the icy expanse. Hours into the flight, the chronometer and navigation logs began to diverge subtly, suggesting elapsed time that did not match the crew's experience. A 2-hour segment of flight appeared to take nearly 4 in real-time observation, yet instrument logs indicated less than an hour had passed. Pilots consulted their watches, compared notes, and re-examined course plotting, but no human error could account for the difference. A subtle unease crept into the cockpit, a quiet recognition that the flight itself was no longer behaving according to known physics, and that their perception of time was failing to align with recorded reality. Outside, whiteout conditions blended the horizon with the snow, making familiar landmarks disappear and leaving only the faint shimmer of distant mountain peaks. The monochromatic landscape erased any sense of scale or distance, amplifying the crew's disorientation. Occasional glimpses of glacial cliffs or crevasses offered brief reassurance before the landscape melted back into undifferentiated white. Even with modern instrumentation, the absence of visual references compounded the strangeness of the temporal irregularities, leaving the crew dependent on devices that themselves seemed to falter against an invisible influence. The flight engineers scrutinized every gauge, noting small discrepancies in altitude, airspeed, and magnetic heading that could not be attributed to turbulence or instrument error. Each adjustment to compass readings revealed further inconsistencies, while barometric altimeters indicated minor fluctuations without corresponding environmental causes. Engine output and fuel consumption appeared normal, yet something in the interplay between instruments and environment defied routine explanation. Every attempted correction highlighted the limits of both human skill and technology in the remote Antarctic skies, creating a growing sense of helpless fascination. Solar activity overhead intensified, auroras curling in the sky, and compasses occasionally fluctuated without warning, compounding the crew's growing unease. The shimmering curtains of green and purple were a visual delight, but also a subtle disruptor of magnetic navigation. Crew members noted erratic compass behavior that sometimes reversed heading readings or produced minor swings in course indication. Though such interference was expected at high latitudes, the magnitude of the deviations exceeded normal expectations, and the correlation with the previously observed temporal gaps could not be ignored. The auroras became both a spectacle and a harbinger, a natural phenomenon seemingly linked to the anomaly. Repeated intervals revealed additional gaps in the logs, periods where radar sweeps and position reports failed to align with recorded times. Observers noticed that sections of recorded data were missing entirely, or appeared in chronological order that contradicted the flight's observed movements. Radar echoes sometimes lagged behind the aircraft's actual position, while other sweeps suggested sudden jumps forward in space. Every repetition reinforced the impossibility. Instruments and crew experience were no longer in agreement, leaving only uncertainty and a mounting sense of the inexplicable. High-frequency atmospheric sensors aboard the aircraft recorded faint, irregular bursts of electromagnetic activity coinciding precisely with the temporal gaps observed in the flight logs. These readings, subtle yet persistent, appeared in brief pulses that did not correspond to known geomagnetic events or solar flare activity. Instrument teams noted minor deviations in onboard radio propagation, voltage fluctuations in auxiliary equipment, and transient shifts in altimeter calibration during the same intervals. While none of these anomalies presented immediate danger, their alignment with the periods of missing time suggested a broader environmental influence beyond standard polar conditions. Detailed post-flight analysis confirmed the correlations, yet offered no mechanistic explanation. The data provided additional evidence that the flight's temporal distortions were not merely perceptual but accompanied by measurable, albeit enigmatic, physical phenomena. Crew members exchanged tense glances, silently calculating the risk of continuing through areas where navigation remained uncertain and communication was sporadic. Our pilots adjusted altitudes, varied speed, and ran multiple cross-checks with the engineers, yet each action seemed to influence the very phenomena they were attempting to measure. The cabin fell into near silence between logged reports, each crew member aware that any misstep in the disorienting conditions could result in catastrophe. The tension was compounded by the awareness that rescue or outside verification was hours away, placing the responsibility for explanation squarely on those aboard the flight. Radio contact with base stations revealed minor inconsistencies in timestamps, leaving messages that arrived either delayed or with missing segments of the conversation. Operators at McMurdo Station confirmed a reception but could offer no explanation for gaps or distortions in signal timing. Crew communications, when replayed later, showed subtle shifts in the sequence of exchanges, as if parts of the dialogue had occurred out of order. These anomalies reinforced the sense of temporal disruption and suggested that the mystery was not confined to visual or instrumental observation alone, but affected the very medium of information transfer itself. Flight historians would later note that the mission adhered strictly to documented Antarctic survey procedures, yet the anomaly remained absent from expected operational outcomes. Logs and reports preserved standard headings, altitudes, and airspeeds, but failed to reconcile the missing or duplicated time periods. Contemporary studies acknowledged that the flight followed every protocol correctly, making the anomaly not a product of human error or technical mismanagement. It was, by all accounts, a verified and mysterious event in a highly controlled operational environment, standing out as one of the few documented disruptions of chronological expectation in polar aviation history. When the aircraft finally touched down, investigators found segments of the flight log either blank or containing entries that contradicted observed conditions, deepening the mystery. Pilots, engineers, and scientists provided first-hand accounts, none able to explain the missing time or sudden positional anomalies recorded by instruments. Even post-flight radar analysis could not reconcile the shifts in recorded positions and elapsed time, leaving a gap between observable phenomena and empirical evidence. The flight became a case study in uncertainty, its data preserved for scrutiny but never fully understood. No technical explanation could reconcile the temporal gaps with the aircraft's known performance or recorded environmental conditions. Experts considered magnetic storms, unusual atmospheric refraction, and even psychological effects on the crew, yet none could account for the precise sequence of anomalies. Each attempt at rationalization highlighted the strangeness rather than dispelling it, cementing the flight as an enduring puzzle in Antarctic aviation records. The instruments had returned to normal, the plane safely on the ground, yet the crew carried with them the unshakable knowledge that somewhere over Antarctica, time itself had faltered. The icebreaker encounter in the Kara Sea, 1985. The icebreaker ploughed steadily through a frozen expanse of the Kara Sea, its reinforced hull groaning under the pressure of shifting flows. The vessel, a diesel-electric research icebreaker, was tasked with routine hydrographic surveys and ice charting along the northern Soviet Arctic route. Satellite imagery had predicted manageable ice conditions, but local variations forced the captain to rely on both sonar and visual observation to navigate treacherous patches. Early into the voyage, nothing seemed amiss. The ship maintained a steady rhythm, slicing through the icy waters while mechanical systems hummed in synchrony. Yet a subtle tension lingered, an unspoken anticipation of the unexpected. On the bridge, officers monitored sonar and radar screens, noting familiar ice ridges and occasional open leads, yet something off appeared on the instruments that did not match any known formation. The radar picked up an object roughly the size of a medium vessel, though no AIS transponder, navigational lights or wake was visible. Sonar pings returned a shape unlike any known ice formation, moving with a calculated, deliberate motion. Officers cross-checked maps and charts, verifying that no shipping lanes or survey buoys were in the vicinity. Still, the signal persisted, a faint but unmistakable anomaly that refused to be dismissed as a simple error or glitch. The first signal emerged as a faint echo, moving too quickly and with too regular a pattern to be a fragment of drifting ice. The object appeared to maintain constant distance from the icebreaker, accelerating when the ship slowed, yet disappearing briefly in dense fog or under broken ice flows. Its speed, calculated at over 10 knots in some sonar sweeps, exceeded expectations for any known natural formation or conventional icebreaker support vessel in the region. Officers documented each sighting meticulously, logging timestamps, coordinates and instrument readings, yet no consistent explanation presented itself, leaving only an eerie question mark over the frozen waters. Engineers adjusted pumps and propulsion systems, ensuring that mechanical vibrations or sensor errors were not responsible for the mysterious readings. Every internal system was tested. Hull stress sensors, engine output monitors, and electrical circuits all reported within normal operational limits. Even emergency power tests and auxiliary sonar checks produced the same anomalous echo, confirming that the phenomenon was external, not a product of internal malfunction. Maintenance crews briefed on the anomaly, examined the hull for ice-induced vibration or unusual resonance patterns but could find no cause, reinforcing the puzzle that had begun to dominate the bridge. Above deck, the bitter wind cut across the observation platform, carrying the scent of salt and metal as the ship creaked against the pack ice. Visual observation proved equally confounding. The object was never clearly seen, its presence inferred only from sonar shadows and radar blips. Occasional glimpses of distorted ice ridges or shifting fog lent fleeting context but never clarity. Deck officers noted subtle disturbances on the water's surface, fleeting ripples that seemed synchronized with the readings below, yet no discernible pattern emerged that could reliably track the anomaly. The Arctic environment itself seemed to conspire, amplifying uncertainty with every gust and frozen swell. Over the following hours, the anomaly reappeared intermittently, each path suggesting deliberate motion rather than a natural occurrence. Every radar sweep returned the same calculated path, almost as if the object was following or shadowing the icebreaker. Officers attempted to alter course to test its response, yet each maneuver appeared anticipated. The phenomenon did not mimic standard navigation rules. It seemed to act with intent, responding to the ship's presence in ways that no known vessel or ice formation could replicate. Crew fatigue and unease grew as patterns persisted, punctuating the long hours of cold, grey Arctic light. Minor fluctuations in electrical systems and sonar feedback coincided with the presence of the object, though no discernible force could be identified. Lights in the engine room dimmed briefly during sonar spikes, and unusual noise signatures reverberated through the hull, yet engineers could not attribute these to mechanical failure. Even backup instruments reported transient anomalies, and logging devices recorded data that seemed to shift by a few seconds relative to standard time. The ship's internal environment had become as mysterious as the waters outside, as if the anomaly extended its influence beyond simple sonar detection. The captain maneuvered cautiously, maintaining distance while attempting to track the phenomenon, yet the object seemed to respond, shifting speed and direction unpredictably. Every decision to accelerate or alter heading produced changes in the echo, reinforcing the impression that it was aware of the icebreaker's movement. Navigational officers recorded heading deviations and estimated distances, noting that conventional tactics for following or intercepting vessels were ineffective. Standard maritime rules seemed suspended. The object defied physical expectation while remaining traceable on instruments, creating a surreal tension that dominated the bridge. Radio communications with nearby stations produced static and delays, leaving gaps in logs and subtle inconsistencies in transmitted times. Attempts to notify other vessels or coordinate with coastal monitoring posts resulted in fragments of conversation, repeated messages, or delayed acknowledgement. Operators at the monitoring centres confirmed reception, but could offer no explanation for the timing irregularities or distorted signal patterns. Even routine reporting became a challenge. Logs indicated missing minutes that could not be reconciled with observed ship movements or expected message transmission times, adding to the sense of isolation and uncertainty. Archived mission protocols noted the icebreaker's strict adherence to standard Arctic navigation and scientific survey routines, making the encounter an official anomaly. Soviet-era documentation confirmed that all maneuvers, scientific observations, and safety protocols were executed correctly. There were no deviations that could account for the readings, and no other vessels or icebreaker missions were logged in the area at that time. The anomaly remained an official entry in the ship's log, a recorded mystery that technical teams later acknowledged but could not explain, further emphasizing the strangeness of the encounter. After returning to port, investigators examined the logs and sonar tapes, noting that recorded traces persisted even though instruments had stabilized. Technical reviews confirmed that sonar echoes and radar blips matched those reported during the mission. Independent analysis suggested unusual reflections inconsistent with ice, marine mammals, or conventional submarines. Written reports emphasized that the phenomenon was fleeting yet systematic, leaving behind traces in data without any physical object ever being sighted directly. The documentation captured the fascination and unease of those who had participated, preserving the encounter as an unresolved Arctic mystery. Meticulous review revealed no known vessel, natural formation, or mechanical phenomenon that could account for the readings, leaving the encounter unexplained. Experts in ice navigation, sonar technology, and polar operations could hypothesize about ice ridges, unusual currents, or underwater acoustic phenomena, yet none of these theories fully reconciled the anomalous echoes. The icebreaker's voyage, initially routine, became an enduring enigma in Arctic exploration records, with the Kara Sea silently holding its secrets beneath the frozen surface. The Kara Sea stretched endlessly around them, icy and indifferent, holding a presence that neither explanation nor elapsed time could diminish. The Norwegian Listening Post Intercept, 1968. Perched atop a windswept ridge overlooking the Barents Sea, the Norwegian Listening Post operated in near constant darkness during the polar night. Its concrete towers and antenna arrays rose above the frozen tundra like silent sentinels, tasked with monitoring an endless range of frequencies emanating across the Arctic. The post was part of a network of early warning and signals intelligence stations maintained during the Cold War, scanning both Soviet and NATO transmissions. On one frigid evening, the monitors registered a signal unlike any they had encountered before, rhythmic, irregular, and impossible to classify. The anomaly was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, yet it drew attention precisely because it did not conform to any known standard. Staff rotated through dimly lit control rooms, scanning a web of high-frequency and very low-frequency channels that carried the region's secrets in invisible waves. Operators recorded routine traffic, including coded Soviet military transmissions, maritime communications, and aeronautical beacons, each carefully logged according to strict protocol. Daily routines had taught them to distinguish anomalies caused by atmospheric interference, aurora borealis effects, or malfunctioning equipment, yet the upcoming intercept would defy those expectations entirely. The silence of the Arctic night outside amplified every crackle in the speakers, turning routine work into a tense, attentive vigil. A series of faint, rhythmic pulses first registered on the primary receiver, unlike any coded signals used by NATO or Soviet units at the time. The pattern was irregular, almost musical in cadence, yet it lacked any recognizable modulation scheme or encryption format. Operators checked known frequencies repeatedly, confirming that the signal was not part of the standard Soviet communication network, nor did it match civilian marine channels. The initial reading lasted only a few minutes before fading, leaving a sense of foreboding that unsettled even veteran staff. Engineers immediately checked amplifiers, antenna arrays, and grounding systems, ruling out technical interference as the source of the strange transmissions. Every system performed within operational specifications, signal amplifiers responded normally, antenna rotors moved with precision, and grounding arrays showed no abnormal currents. Independent diagnostic runs on backup receivers confirmed the pulses persisted, eliminating the possibility of internal error. It became evident that the anomaly was external, originating somewhere across the frozen expanse of the Barents Sea, or higher in the ionosphere, a source undetectable by conventional tracking methods. Outside, auroral curtains shimmered overhead, casting green and violet light across the snow and occasionally altering the behaviour of radio signals in subtle ways. Solar winds had heightened geomagnetic activity that night, producing intense northern lights visible even from the post's isolated ridge. Operators noted that the signal strength occasionally fluctuated in synchrony with bursts of auroral activity, suggesting a potential interaction between the transmission and the ionosphere. Yet even seasoned analysts could not fully explain the correlation, adding another layer of mystery to the phenomenon. The pulses revealed an irregular pattern, at times slowing or accelerating, yet they defied any known modulation or encryption method, leaving analysts puzzled. Attempts to decode the signal using standard cryptographic algorithms failed repeatedly, producing results no better than random noise. The operators experimented with alternative demodulation schemes, spectral analysis, and even analog filtering methods, but the source remained elusive. Each variation in the rhythm hinted at intelligence behind it, as though the transmission had a purpose, yet its meaning remained entirely hidden. Operators in the listening post documented every variation, noting the hum of equipment, the crackle of static, and the almost imperceptible changes in the signal's strength. Every reading was meticulously logged, down to fractions of a second, creating a record that would later be referenced in Cold War archives. The tension among staff grew as the night progressed, each pulse reinforcing the unspoken notion that something was monitoring their reactions as much as they were observing it. Coffee cups sat half full beside keyboards, forgotten, while eyes remained fixed on oscilloscopes and frequency meters. Communication with nearby stations produced no comparable readings, isolating the anomaly to the Barents Sea sector. Messages sent to adjacent Norwegian posts and Allied monitoring stations returned only the static of normal Arctic interference. No other site had recorded the rhythmic pulses. This exclusivity deepened the puzzle, suggesting the signal's origin was either highly localized or capable of evading broader detection. Analysts considered natural phenomena, man-made devices, and even experimental technology, but no hypothesis fully accounted for the singular nature of the intercept. Historical operational logs emphasized the station's strict adherence to Cold War protocols, making this intercept particularly notable and anomalous. Every procedure had been followed correctly, every observation verified against standard intelligence practices. Subsequent reports highlighted the anomaly not as an equipment failure, but as an unexplained event in a rigorously controlled environment. Veterans of the post later recalled that the event had left a lasting impression, precisely because it could not be reconciled with any operational expectation or prior experience. Spectrograms and wave analyses conducted later revealed frequencies and harmonics that had no identified source, confounding even experienced technicians. The spectral pattern suggested intentionality, a regularity that nature rarely produces, yet the transmissions had qualities inconsistent with any known electronic device of the era. Analysts debated whether the signal originated from suborbital phenomena, ionospheric reflection, or some unknown technology, but no evidence supported any conclusion. Every recording preserved the mystery, a frozen snapshot of an event that refused to yield its secrets. Among the stacks of analog tapes and reel-to-reel recorders, analysts discovered faint background anomalies embedded within the transmissions, imperceptible to the ear yet persistent across multiple recordings. These subtle irregularities suggested the signal might have been layered or multidimensional, incorporating harmonics or subaudible frequencies that eluded real-time monitoring. Acoustic engineers later noted patterns reminiscent of natural resonances in the Arctic atmosphere, yet no known phenomenon could fully account for the precision of the repetitions. Researchers speculated that the layering could have been intentional, perhaps a method to encode information beyond conventional human detection. The discovery added a new layer of complexity, highlighting that the anomaly was not only a single frequency event, but a multifaceted signal capable of challenging both human perception and scientific instrumentation. Days after the initial intercept, Subtle fluctuations in local magnetic readings and compass deviations hinted that the phenomenon had left a measurable imprint on the environment itself. Magnetic compasses wavered unpredictably, and minor variations in radio propagation were noted long after the pulses stopped. Engineers could find no local source for these anomalies, and environmental records suggested they were confined to the ridge and nearby coastal waters. The station's isolation amplified these effects, turning minor physical disturbances into tangible reminders of an unexplained presence. When the transmission ceased as abruptly as it had begun, the post was left with only fragmented data, incomplete recordings, and an enduring sense of uncertainty. The rhythmic pulses never returned, and all subsequent attempts to trace or provoke a response failed. Logs, spectrograms, and field notes preserved the anomaly, but the true nature of the signal remained unknown, a ghostly presence lingering across Arctic frequencies. The incident was catalogued in Cold War intelligence archives as a verified anomaly, acknowledged yet unsolved, a testament to the limits of human observation in the polar frontier. In the silent Arctic darkness, the logs alone whispered of a presence that had passed through the airwaves, intangible yet undeniable. The McMurdo Perimeter Breach, 1991. Frost clung to every surface of McMurdo Station, and the night air carried a low, whistling wind that made the silence heavier than usual. The station's lights reflected off icy surfaces, illuminating rows of metal buildings and storage depots, yet the surrounding ice sheet seemed to stretch into an infinite darkness beyond human reach. That night, the usual hum of generators and ventilation systems contrasted sharply with the absolute stillness beyond the perimeter, as if the polar expanse itself were holding its breath. It was under these conditions that the first anomaly quietly manifested, unnoticed at first, yet destined to unsettle the personnel who would witness its aftermath. Sensors lining the outer perimeter were calibrated meticulously, their daily readings forming a reliable baseline that rarely raised concern. Motion detectors, infrared cameras, and acoustic monitors were positioned to cover every potential approach to the station, overlapping fields of detection to eliminate blind spots. The logs maintained by night shift operators were thorough, marking even minor environmental changes such as drifting snow or temporary signal interference from solar activity. For years, these instruments had functioned predictably, creating a sense of security that was now about to be challenged in ways no manual or protocol could prepare for. An alarm cut through the routine, flashing on control panels with a rhythm that no operator had seen before, marking a section of the eastern ice fence as breached. Red lights pulsed in synchronization with a faint, high-pitched tone emanating from the monitoring console. Operators stared at the display, cross-checking wiring diagrams and sensor calibration logs, initially suspecting a technical malfunction. But repeated tests and backup systems confirmed the reading. A breach had been detected. It was precise, sudden, and localized, unlike any drift or false alarm previously experienced. Personnel scrambled along narrow walkways, their boots crunching on frozen tarmac as they scanned the darkened horizon for signs of movement. Flashlights swept across the ice, catching the occasional glint of frost crystals in the wind, but nothing visibly approached or retreated from the breach zone. Communications were tense but orderly, with guards reporting every minor observation and coordinating perimeter checks, yet the anomaly defied immediate detection. The contrast between the highly active, focused human response and the emptiness beyond the station created an unnerving sense of isolation. A faint glow appeared near the distant ridge, flickering in irregular intervals that suggested neither human nor mechanical origin. It did not correspond with any vehicle, aircraft, or nearby station lighting, and its movement was irregular, sometimes disappearing entirely before reappearing moments later. Observers noted that the glow seemed to interact with the ice surface, reflecting differently than the moonlight or artificial station illumination. While brief and elusive, it left a lasting impression on those who witnessed it, prompting both technical reports and informal discussions about what had been seen. Infrared cameras recorded shifts in temperature across the snowdrifts, yet the shapes detected defied immediate interpretation, moving in patterns inconsistent with ordinary wildlife. The thermal signatures were too precise for drifting snow or gusting wind, yet too erratic to resemble the slow, steady progress of known animals in the region. Analysts reviewing the footage later noted brief interruptions in the heat map that suggested an object or entity capable of rapid movement, briefly vanishing from infrared view before re-emerging along a slightly altered path. The phenomenon resisted conventional classification. Snow was disturbed in jagged traces, partially filled by drifting ice, implying a presence that had passed through yet left almost no evidence. Footprints appeared sporadically and ended abruptly, as if the snow itself had reclaimed the marks almost immediately. Small panels of fencing near the breach zone were found slightly bent or misaligned, yet no tools or mechanical devices were discovered in the vicinity. These physical traces contributed to the mystery. Something had entered and exited, leaving behind subtle indications but no definitive clues to its nature. Archived satellite imagery reviewed weeks later revealed subtle thermal distortions along the eastern perimeter, patterns that had gone unnoticed during the live monitoring of the breach. The heat signatures suggested brief, localized warming of the ice surface, too faint to trigger the perimeter's sensors but consistent with something moving just above or beneath the snow layer. Analysts compared the images with patrol logs and sensor data, noting that the distortions aligned precisely with the timing of the anomalous readings on the ground. While the cause remained unexplained, the thermal evidence added a third layer to the phenomenon. Not just visual, auditory and mechanical anomalies, but also subtle energy interactions with the environment itself. These findings hinted at a presence capable of affecting multiple detection modalities simultaneously, deepening the enigma of the perimeter breach. Patrol logs revealed minute gaps in reporting, sensor anomalies that could not be reconciled with normal operational activity, heightening concern among the staff. Times recorded in motion detectors occasionally skipped intervals or registered activity that was invisible on cameras. Logs from personnel patrolling the breach zone noted seconds where radio communications faltered without clear cause. This combination of environmental, mechanical and observational irregularities suggested an event that challenged both human perception and the station's instrumentation simultaneously. Witness accounts conflicted with instrumentation, describing fleeting shadows and sudden silences that the monitors had failed to capture. One guard reported hearing the crunch of footsteps that seemed to come from multiple directions at once, yet the cameras recorded only the empty ridge and swaying snow. Another described a brief cold rush of air that felt out of place even for the known Antarctic gusts, coinciding with a spike in motion sensor readings. These anecdotal observations added tension as personnel struggled to reconcile what they saw and felt with what the instruments officially recorded. Nearby field camps confirmed nothing unusual, isolating the phenomenon to the perimeter itself and suggesting it was localized yet intentional. Survey teams operating several kilometers away reported routine readings and no disruptions, meaning that whatever caused the breach was confined to McMurdo's boundary. This localization was significant. It indicated that the anomaly was neither widespread natural interference nor coincidental, but focused in space and time, pointing to a level of precision or intelligence beyond ordinary explanation. Analysts spent hours cross-referencing sensor data, environmental recordings, and patrol movements, uncovering patterns that offered no conclusive explanation. Subtle repetitions appeared in the logs, hints of movement timing that matched no predictable cycles, while environmental variables such as wind direction and ambient temperature could not account for the sequence of events. Even experienced engineers and Cold War-era security specialists could only speculate, noting that the anomaly intersected human observation, automated detection, and natural conditions in a way that defied conventional understanding. When the transmission ceased as abruptly as it had begun, the post was left with only fragmented data, incomplete recordings, and an enduring sense of uncertainty. The breach left no trace of intruders, yet the meticulous documentation of the event remained a testament to its reality. Scientists and security personnel later described a lingering tension that pervaded the station, an awareness that the ice and darkness could conceal phenomena both observable and entirely imperceptible. Even as sunlight broke over the horizon, the ridge seemed to hold a silent witness to what had passed, its presence recorded only in whispers and shadows that no one could fully interpret. The classified recovery mission that logged nothing, 1959. Snow swept across the barren expanse of northern Greenland, a brittle wind carrying the taste of ice and salt as a small, highly classified recovery mission prepared to depart from the limited airstrip. Orders were delivered verbally and in sealed envelopes, leaving minimal trace of the operation's true purpose. The men who would participate were briefed in hushed tones, reminded that their work must leave no permanent mark and that the Arctic itself might conspire against any attempt to document their actions. By the time the transport plane lifted off, the landscape below seemed both familiar and impossibly alien, a frozen world where even the most precise instrumentation could be challenged. Preparation for the mission had taken weeks, involving careful coordination with military engineers, aircraft specialists, and Arctic survival teams. Equipment was double-checked and triple-checked, yet certain critical modules were intentionally left unmarked or unlogged, a deliberate measure that would obscure later scrutiny. Even the maps provided to the team contained only approximate coordinates, further protecting the mission's secrecy. Personnel were instructed to maintain strict operational silence, and any discussion of the mission outside authorized channels was forbidden under penalty of disciplinary action. As the transport plane cut across the low Arctic clouds, instruments registered temperatures far below typical for the season, and barometric readings fluctuated in ways that hinted at unseen atmospheric currents. Early observations seemed routine, yet subtle anomalies began to appear. Small, transient radar echoes that faded before confirmation, and geomagnetic shifts that were barely detectable on portable devices. The team noted these in private logs, aware that official records would reflect nothing unusual. Each subtle disturbance became another thread in a web of uncertainty, weaving a tension that seemed to thicken with every mile flown. Subsequent analysis of fuel consumption revealed a discrepancy that could not be explained by standard Arctic flight operations. The transport plane had reportedly burned more fuel than expected for the distances covered, even after accounting for headwinds, maneuvering, and extra weight from equipment. Pilots and engineers could find no mechanical reason for the anomaly, and navigational logs showed no diversions or prolonged idling. While minor variations in fuel use are common in extreme environments, the consistent overuse suggested additional unexplained strain, possibly due to environmental interference, aerodynamic anomalies, or unseen forces acting on the aircraft. This subtle, quantitative evidence became one of the few measurable traces of the mission's activity, hinting at a presence or phenomenon that left almost no conventional record. Upon arrival at the recovery site, the team disembarked into a landscape both stark and disorienting. Snow and ice stretched without clear landmarks, and drifts masked any surface irregularities. The instruments deployed to scan the ground registered almost nothing. Minimal vibrations, no discernible heat signatures, and only faint electromagnetic fluctuations, all of which fell within expected background noise. Yet the men moving carefully across the frozen terrain sensed that the ice was not entirely inert, that it might be holding some secret beyond their comprehension. Their recorded observations were tentative, and the official mission logs were empty, offering only sterile entries of coordinates and times. Even as the mission proceeded, conflicting observations emerged. One technician recalled hearing a low, intermittent hum echoing through the ice, while another reported fleeting reflections of light that no camera could capture. A brief tremor shifted snow across the horizon, visible for only a few seconds, yet the instruments failed to record it. These discrepancies highlighted the tension between human perception and mechanical verification, and they reinforced the impression that the operation was encountering something deliberately elusive, resisting all attempts at capture or measurement. Environmental conditions compounded the uncertainty. Blizzards arrived without warning, obscuring visibility and complicating navigation. Shifting ice sheets produced faint groaning noises that could be mistaken for mechanical failures or seismic activity. Solar radiation caused sporadic interference with communication devices, and geomagnetic disturbances appeared in localized patches. While each phenomenon had a plausible natural explanation, their simultaneous occurrence during a highly controlled recovery effort suggested the operation was confronting more than the ordinary hazards of the Arctic. Technical difficulties were relentless. Sensors misfired, calibration signals fluctuated unpredictably, and certain devices stopped transmitting entirely without warning. Engineers replaced equipment, recalibrated modules, and conducted repetitive sweeps, yet the results remained inconclusive. The combination of environmental interference and equipment anomalies created a pattern that was frustratingly suggestive of some unknown presence. There were hints in the data, but nothing that could be definitively documented or reported. Each attempt to reconcile readings with reality deepened the sense that the Arctic itself was actively resisting observation. Secrecy added another layer to the enigma. Orders restricted all recording of sensitive details, and any notes on anomalous events had to be stored separately and flagged for later destruction. Communications with higher command were brief and heavily coded, leaving no opportunity to explain discrepancies or request clarifications. The personnel, aware that their own observations could be censored or erased, began to record mental notes, memorizing sequences of events that would otherwise vanish entirely. These procedural restrictions transformed the mission into a puzzle not only of physical retrieval, but of human memory and trust. Despite extensive searching and careful measurement, actual recovery efforts yielded nothing. The team deployed equipment to probe beneath the ice, examined depressions in the snow, and followed all visual and magnetic leads, yet all attempts resulted in null readings. No object was recovered, no anomaly isolated. This paradox, intensive activity producing an absence of measurable results, haunted the participants. Every hour spent in the frozen expanse reinforced the impression that the operation was encountering a deliberate void, as though the very target of their mission existed to remain undetectable. The psychological impact was profound. Men accustomed to Arctic hardships found themselves unsettled by the silence of the data, the emptiness of logs, and the inconsistency between personal observation and official records. Anxiety spread through the team quietly, as individuals speculated in private on what could account for both the extreme security measures and the conspicuous lack of results. Questions were unspoken, and no one dared record conjectures officially, creating a tension that weighed as heavily as the sub-zero winds. When the mission concluded, the team departed the site with only minimal official documentation, coordinates visited, times logged, and equipment lists filed. No recoveries were reported, and the anomalous events noted privately were omitted from final records. Internal communications were restricted further, and several logs that might have contained personal impressions or tentative hypotheses were deliberately removed or destroyed. To the outside world, the mission had achieved nothing. Internally, the personnel carried a layered understanding of unusual phenomena that official reports could not reflect. Many years on, declassified fragments of the operation reveal only bare coordinates, cursory timestamps, and references to procedural irregularities, leaving the nature of the mission almost entirely unresolved. Historians and Arctic researchers can identify the effort, but cannot reconstruct its outcomes, constrained by missing data and deliberate erasure. The absence of information is itself the defining feature. The mission is remembered not for what it accomplished, but for what it left unrecorded, a void in both logs and collective memory that continues to inspire questions about what truly transpired on that frozen Arctic plain. In the end, the ice held its secrets as it always had, preserving a silence so absolute that the traces of human endeavour seemed almost inconsequential, and perhaps intentionally so. The Arctic Patrol that was shadowed, 1973. The white wastes of the northern polar ocean are places where silence is a tangible weight, and in the winter of 1973 a Canadian military patrol was moving across shifting floes with that silence pressed against them when something unseen joined their watch. From the outset of the mission, the personnel were acutely aware of the precarious nature of Arctic sovereignty, for the high Arctic had become a strategic fulcrum in the Cold War, with long-range radar lines and reconnaissance flights scanning the calendar months for anything unusual. The patrol's instruments were designed to detect aircraft, yet a presence would soon challenge everything they believed they could observe. Lieutenant James Sterling, the patrol's commanding officer, was a seasoned veteran of northern deployments, a man who had seen whiteout storms worse than any recruit could imagine and had felt the ice shift like an old wound beneath his boots. Yet none of his years of wilderness duty prepared him for the account that would appear later in the patrol log. During a routine sovereignty sweep over the ice floes, the team encountered an aerial presence that seemed to maintain formation above them without appearing on any radar or surveillance channel, leaving the experienced operators unsettled and uncertain. The patrol itself was one of many small detachments that traversed the far north as part of Canada's broader efforts to exercise sovereignty and gather data on shifting ice and weather. These patrols were often solo or small team missions, moving on foot or ski, and radio contact with higher command was intermittent at best because of atmospheric interference and the limitations of high-frequency equipment. The object was first noted not by instruments, but by visual observers during a late afternoon, when the sun hung low above the horizon, casting long shadows across the icy crust. What they saw at first looked like a lenticular cloud, suspended and still, but the shape and sheen were too precise to be a simple optical illusion. Corporal Daniel Keating was the first to break the silence on the patrol's shoulder-to-shoulder radio net, his voice tight with disbelief, when he described how the object hovered directly above their compass, bearing toward the pole. Keating's tone was not the voice of a man seeking attention, but of one profoundly unsettled, for even seasoned northern operators learned quickly that false contacts could come from atmospheric mirages or ice reflections, yet he insisted this was neither phantom nor mirage. Around him, the patrol struck a human hush, faces turned upward into the blinding glare of the Arctic day. The official patrol log entries are terse, recording routine observations of ice conditions, temperatures and wildlife. But one section survives where Stirling himself recounted the anomaly in starkly measured language. He made clear that the object above them produced no discernible return on their surveillance equipment, even when examined later, a fact that puzzled analysts who reviewed the file in confidential sessions. Their instruments were designed to detect aircraft, yet this presence did not register in any conventional sense, leaving the encounter unexplainable within known parameters. In the quiet of the patrol's makeshift base camp that night, taken near the edge of an island of compressed ice, the men debated what they had seen. Meteorological explanations were offered and discarded with equal intensity, for the Arctic skies can produce rare lenticular cloud formations and atmospheric ducting effects, but these phenomena do not hold a shape fixed over minutes, nor evoke the sense of awareness that each soldier felt as they watched. They were trained to observe details, and in their experience nothing behaved like this object. Nothing that was catalogued in their manuals nor briefed in their Arctic survival courses. Stirling finally keyed a limited cipher message back to command headquarters, noting a sighting that was unidentified and non-compliant with known aerial signatures. By the time higher command personnel reviewed the patrol's communications, several days had passed and the patrol was already traversing toward their extraction point on the frozen sea, their own instruments once again yielding nothing beyond static and occasional migratory bird radar flecks. Nevertheless, analysts flagged the message for review, recognizing that such an encounter merited attention despite its improbability. The men of the patrol felt the incident linger in unspoken ways as they completed their northward circuit back to Yellowknife and eventually to southern postings, a quiet bond forming among them through shared uncertainty and the knowledge that what they saw had not been captured in a traceable echo on any radar sweep. Back at base, routine debriefings went through the motions of discussing frostbite prevention, ice drift patterns, and logistical timing for future missions, but Stirling's remark that nothing known to friendly or hostile forces was detected remained an outlier in the otherwise methodical archive. Later archival reviews by researchers placed this patrol's account within a broader pattern of unexplained sightings, reported by military and civilian observers across high latitudes, a tapestry of anecdote and technical ambiguity that continues to challenge analysts who strive to distinguish between instrument error, rare meteorological effects, and phenomena that defy easy classification. The Arctic Ocean is notoriously fickle, changing with ferocity and speed, and the physics of radio and radar propagation close to the geomagnetic pole complicate any attempt to draw definitive conclusions from a single set of observations. Many years after 1973, as new technology refines our ability to see and sense more deeply into Arctic airspace, the patrol's log remains a compelling piece of historical evidence at the crossroads of documented military vigilance and the unexplained, prompting questions about what was truly overhead that day and why no corroborating radar trace exists. On quiet nights in modern Arctic research stations, scientists and defense personnel alike pore over data streams from satellites, over the horizon radars and airborne sensors, yet there are still moments when their instruments record signatures that do not fit existing templates, and analysts are left, as Stirling was, to ponder the unseen. For the members of the 1973 patrol, the memory of the object hovering silently above the ice refused to fade with time. Even decades later, discussions of the encounter remained hushed, shared only in private recollections or between those who had witnessed it firsthand. They had traversed thousands of kilometres of shifting floes, endured storms that tested the limits of human endurance, and observed the Arctic in all its unforgiving extremes, yet this anomaly defied every expectation and every training manual. The object left no trace on instruments, no path in the snow, and no explanation in any official report, yet its presence lingered in memory, persistent and unaccounted for, a quiet reminder of the unknown waiting beyond the edge of the mapped world. And though the ice continues its slow drift across the Arctic basin, the question of what truly shadowed that patrol remains unanswered and eerier still with each passing year. The Soviet pilot's final transmission, 1964. Above the frozen expanse, a solitary aircraft traced a path through the dim northern sunlight, its pilot unaware that the mission would soon register as one of the Cold War's most perplexing mysteries. The flight was part of a routine Arctic patrol along the northern coast of Siberia, designed to monitor airspace and maintain readiness against potential incursions. The plane moved with quiet precision, instruments aligned and navigation charts at the ready, while the crew remained alert to every subtle shift in the terrain below. Yet despite their meticulous preparation, they were about to encounter an event that would remain unexplained for decades. Auroras shimmered across the polar sky, streaks of green and violet painting the cockpit windows in a light that was at once mesmerizing and strangely disorienting. The dancing waves reflected off the frost that had begun to accumulate along the edges of the glass, while the pilots squinted to distinguish cloud from ice below. Above the horizon, thin layers of cirrus clouds glowed faintly in the high-latitude sun, adding to the sense that the aircraft was moving through a realm suspended between reality and the unknown. It was a serene but fragile beauty, the kind that can lull even the most experienced aviator into distraction. The twin-engine jet hummed steadily, instruments aligned to charts and compass bearings, navigation systems calibrated to the Arctic's unforgiving magnetic irregularities. Gyroscopic compasses were checked repeatedly against the sun's position, and radio beacons scattered along the Siberian coast, while altimeters and airspeed indicators hummed with mechanical fidelity. The crew worked in practiced rhythm, monitoring fuel lines, engine temperature, and course deviations, while making small adjustments to maintain strict formation along the Northern Patrol corridor. Every detail of the flight was accounted for, every procedure executed with care, yet an invisible variable was already entering the zone of observation. A sudden glint far below the wing caught the pilot's eye, something moving against the ice in a pattern that refused immediate explanation. At first, it seemed like reflected sunlight or a jagged ridge of ice, but the object's motion was subtle yet purposeful, following the aircraft as if aware of its passage. The pilot adjusted the binoculars mounted on the dashboard, seeking clarity, but the shape remained elusive, luminous yet featureless, leaving only the faintest impression against the sprawling white below. Even with altitude and distance accounted for, the visual anomaly did not conform to any natural or human-made pattern familiar to Arctic aviation. Voices crackled over the intercom, measured and tense, as the crew cross-checked altitudes and headings, each gesture revealing growing unease without yet naming the cause. Flight engineers called out minor deviations and readings, but their eyes continually flicked toward the same unidentifiable shimmer below. The navigator murmured about possible ice mirages or reflections from compressed snow, while the co-pilot noted the absence of any detectable radar return. Each correction and observation was precise, but the unease grew collectively, a quiet acknowledgement that the anomaly was defying both expectation and technology. In a matter of moments, lights from an unidentified source shifted with impossible speed, while dials and gauges began to fluctuate in ways inconsistent with the aircraft's operation. The pilot observed small bursts of illumination darting beneath the wings, moving in ways that did not match prevailing winds or ice drift patterns. Simultaneously, compass readings wavered, altimeters jittered, and the artificial horizon flickered briefly. Instruments that had been reliable throughout the patrol became erratic, responding to forces that could not be explained by mechanical failure alone. The crew exchanged concerned glances, each silently registering that they were witnessing something outside established norms. Electrical readings that had been reliable since takeoff now flickered and fell silent, leaving only the low hum of the engines to fill the sudden void of certainty. Navigational systems powered down intermittently, radios became intermittent static, and backup instruments required constant attention to avoid false readings. The Arctic environment, temperature extremes, magnetic interference, and solar radiation, was known to affect avionics, yet the anomalies were localized and synchronized with the visual phenomenon. The silence of the cockpit, broken only by the mechanical pulse of the engines, amplified the tension as the crew realized they were relying entirely on human observation in a domain where technology had inexplicably failed. The pilot's radio transmission, recorded in declassified logs, carried an urgency that betrayed his trained composure, referencing a presence that appeared and vanished without trace. His words were clipped but precise, documenting the aircraft's position, the anomalous lights below, and the unusual behavior of the instruments. There was no panic in the delivery, only a controlled but evident acknowledgement of something unidentifiable. Ground stations later noted that the transmission was the last they received, containing cryptic references to an object moving beneath, and interference affecting all readings, after which the signal dropped completely. Ground control listened and responded, though every attempt to re-establish contact returned only static, as if the Arctic itself had swallowed the aircraft's signals. Operators attempted repeated radio calls, rerouted channels and emergency protocols, yet the aircraft remained absent from radar screens and unreachable by voice. Command personnel recorded the anomaly, marking the flight as lost to unknown causes, though no wreckage or definitive explanation was ever confirmed. The combination of silence, the missing radar trace, and the last transmission created a record that continues to provoke questions about what the pilot encountered that day. Outside, the aurora danced and pulsed, magnetic currents distorting both instrument readings and perception, creating an environment where even seasoned aviators could no longer rely entirely on technology. Light refracted in unpredictable ways, the horizon itself appearing to tilt and shift, and shadows cast by ice ridges seemed to move independently of the aircraft's motion. Observers later speculated that geomagnetic anomalies could have influenced instruments, yet no known phenomenon fully accounts for the synchronized visual and technical disturbances experienced mid-flight. The cockpit, once a realm of precision and certainty, had become a theatre of the unexplained. In the years since, analysts examining the logs have found the incident as confounding as it was at the moment, a record that challenges the boundaries of known aerial phenomena and Cold War surveillance. Declassified Soviet aviation reports confirm the last transmissions, and historians note the flight among a series of northern polar anomalies recorded in military archives. No subsequent investigation has definitively explained the combination of visual, electrical, and radar irregularities documented during the mission. The event remains a singular, enduring testament to the unknown hazards that could exist in extreme polar environments. For anyone reviewing the tapes and records today, the pilot's final moments evoke not just technical anomalies, but the profound vulnerability of man against the vast, indifferent expanse of the polar north. The logs reveal a confrontation between human skill and the limits of both perception and technology, a fleeting encounter that, though brief, left an indelible mark on Arctic aviation history. Observers can reconstruct position, altitude, and conditions, yet the phenomenon itself remains unclassifiable, lingering in memory, archived evidence, and the imagination of those who study the polar frontier. Beyond radar and comprehension, the pilot's final transmission still drifts across the Arctic sky, its meaning unresolved and its presence unforgotten. The Antarctic Seismic Spike with No Epicenter, 1987. The Antarctic ice shelf stretched in silent monotony, a vast expanse of white where a sudden anomaly would briefly ripple through the measured order of scientific observation. Research teams stationed at temporary huts monitored ice movement and subglacial activity, their instruments humming quietly in the constant wind. Routine measurements of crevasse shifts, snow compaction, and minor tremors had long been catalogued to build an understanding of the continent's slow rhythms. On one otherwise ordinary day in 1987, however, one station's seismograph registered a spike so sharp it jolted scientists from the predictable patterns they had relied on for years. Winds swept across crevassed terrain, carrying flakes of snow that danced over the instruments and research huts, lending the continent an atmosphere both beautiful and perilous. The storm-driven gusts made routine observations challenging, forcing teams to check and recalibrate sensors multiple times throughout each day. Temperatures hovered well below freezing, ice sheets groaning under their own weight, yet nothing in the weather patterns or geological knowledge of the region suggested the arrival of an anomalous seismic event. The spike on the seismograph seemed incongruent with both environment and expectation, its signals sharp, isolated, and impossible to ignore. Seismographs hummed steadily in their stations, calibrated to detect every tremor, icequake, and glacial shift, the precision of modern geophysics rarely questioned in this remote corner of the world. Each sensor had been carefully installed and aligned with neighbouring stations to form a network capable of triangulating natural seismic activity. Logs meticulously recorded shifts in ice mass, subglacial water flow, and tectonic movement, ensuring researchers could distinguish routine phenomena from true anomalies. Yet, when the spike appeared, it did not align with any previously observed event, suggesting a source outside the scope of known Antarctic seismic behaviour. Without warning, a sharp spike appeared on one station's log, a signal unlike any background noise or minor tremor previously recorded. The reading surged in a matter of seconds, peaking at a magnitude that would normally indicate a significant seismic disturbance. Instruments nearby showed nothing comparable, and the characteristic wave patterns expected from tectonic events were absent. The anomaly seemed to radiate through the recorded data without a detectable epicenter, as though the ice itself had momentarily reacted to some invisible force. For a moment the laboratory fell silent, the hum of the generators seeming strangely muted. Researchers hurried to examine the readings, checking calibration and power sources, their fingers moving over controls with the practiced certainty of those accustomed to extreme isolation. Every cable and connector was scrutinized, each sensor tested for malfunctions or interference. The spike persisted in the logs even after repeated system resets, and cross-comparison with archival data confirmed that no prior event of similar signature existed. Yet the station's instruments showed no indication of external impact, and the anomaly seemed entirely self-contained within the electronic records. Their professionalism clashed with growing unease. Cross-referencing other nearby stations revealed a baffling discrepancy. No epicenter registered, no tectonic explanation appeared, leaving the team with only the singular spike in evidence. Stations hundreds of kilometers away reported quiet readings, normal ice sheet creaking and background seismic hums, yet the magnitude of the spike suggested a significant release of energy. Scientists debated whether the signal could be an instrument artifact, localized ice collapse, or something else entirely, but no physical evidence supported any conventional explanation. The anomaly stood alone, stubbornly defying both expectation and instrumentation. Antarctic's seismic history offered few parallels, the few known icequakes and volcanic tremors providing no blueprint for a disturbance that left no trace in the surrounding environment. Unlike earthquakes elsewhere on the planet, Antarctic tremors are typically slow-moving and detectable over wide areas, often accompanied by acoustic signals and glacial water channels. This spike, however, was instantaneous in appearance, leaving no aftershocks or ripple effects in the nearby ice. Historical comparisons only deepen the mystery, reinforcing that the event was unlike any recorded seismic activity in the region's extensive logs. Ice core samples from nearby drilling sites were re-examined, revealing subtle density variations and tiny unexplained fissures that coincided with the timing of the seismic spike. Chemical analysis showed no volcanic ash or known mineral displacement that might account for sudden movement, and layers of compacted snow and ice above and below the anomaly appeared undisturbed. These microsigns hinted at a force that left virtually no trace on the surface, yet subtly altered the ice internally. For researchers, the data suggested that whatever caused the spike may have interacted with the ice in a way entirely unlike typical glacial or tectonic activity, deepening the enigma of the event. Satellite imagery and ice-penetrating radar were scrutinized, revealing nothing unusual beneath the surface. Every known channel for seismic energy seemed to deny the event had occurred. Glacial strata showed no fissures, subglacial lakes remained stable, and ocean floor mapping provided no corresponding disturbance. Specialists examined each frame of available imagery for subtle dislocations, yet every trace of movement appeared consistent with long-term glacial drift. The spike existed in the seismograph alone, a ghostly pulse in a continent otherwise dominated by predictable, slow-moving processes. Meteorological conditions and geomagnetic activity were considered and dismissed, for even auroral interference could not account for a spike of this magnitude and clarity. Scientists analysed solar wind data, magnetic storm records, and atmospheric pressure fluctuations, finding no correlation. Extreme cold or sudden wind shifts were likewise inadequate explanations. The spike did not match known patterns of environmental interference, and every plausible terrestrial cause was systematically eliminated. Its persistence as an isolated signal made it all the more inexplicable, leaving researchers with questions rather than answers. Logbooks filled with hypotheses reflected both caution and speculation, a mixture of professional restraint and the unsettling realization that some phenomena defy explanation. Entries noted calibration verification, peer consultations, and cross-disciplinary discussions. Some suggested novel glacial mechanisms, others hinted at undiscovered subglacial processes, yet none could fully account for the event. The anomaly became a subject of cautious discussion, referenced only in technical footnotes, yet its very presence haunted the scientific community, a reminder that even in the age of modern instrumentation, nature retains moments beyond comprehension. The anomaly was archived alongside decades of Antarctic observations, a silent record that continued to puzzle scientists, a testament to the continent's capacity for secrets beyond human reach. Each subsequent expedition to the area treated the location with heightened attention, yet repeated monitoring yielded only ordinary readings. Data collection, though extensive, failed to reproduce or explain the event, and the spike remained a singular moment in the continent's geophysical record. Researchers accepted that some phenomena may occur without warning and without measurable cause, leaving the record incomplete and enigmatic. Those who monitored the frozen expanse carried with them the knowledge that even meticulously gathered data cannot always illuminate every occurrence, and that the Antarctic can conceal truths indefinitely. The vastness of the ice, combined with its remote and hostile environment, ensures that anomalies may remain isolated, recorded only fleetingly in the electronic memory of human instruments. For those who study the continent, the spike is a silent reminder of the boundary between observation and the unknown, where even precision fails to capture the full scope of natural phenomena. Far below the ice and far beyond observation, the source of that sudden tremor remains hidden, silent, and inexplicably intact. The Polaris missile test interruption, 1960. The Launch Control Center hummed with meticulous precision, technicians checking readings and alignment for the Polaris missile scheduled to depart from the Arctic test site. Every instrument and dial had been calibrated over weeks, with engineers and officers running through checklists to ensure every variable was accounted for. The missile itself rested in the silvery cradle of its launch platform, its guidance systems verified to near perfection. At this latitude, any deviation could be catastrophic, yet the personnel involved were confident in the redundancies built into their procedures. Still, a subtle unease lingered in the control room, as though the Arctic itself had its own agenda. Snow and ice swept across the frozen coastline, blanketing observation towers and radar installations in a blinding white that concealed every distant horizon. Wind-driven crystals scoured metal surfaces and antenna arrays, producing a rhythmic, high-pitched whistle that merged with the hum of generators. Visibility dropped intermittently, forcing operators to rely on radar and sensors to monitor surrounding airspace. In a landscape this inhospitable, even minor disruptions could compound into serious errors. The cold penetrated layers of insulation, chilling nerves and steadying focus, reminding everyone that the Arctic demanded both vigilance and respect at every turn. Engineers calibrated guidance gyros, verified inertial navigation systems, and ran final diagnostics on telemetry equipment, ensuring that every procedure met the highest standards of military rigor. Screens flickered with simulated trajectories, while the missile's inertial system was synchronized with reference markers far beyond the horizon. Every console beeped in unison with progress updates, and communication loops connected each station to headquarters hundreds of miles away. Technicians documented every adjustment, the room alive with controlled energy. human skill and mechanical precision intertwined in a carefully orchestrated ballet designed to guarantee that the Polaris missile would depart and reach its target flawlessly, until the unexpected arrived. Early in the countdown, a fleeting blip appeared on one of the radar arrays, small enough to be mistaken for atmospheric interference, but persistent enough to draw the attention of a junior officer. The signal moved in ways inconsistent with known aircraft or meteorological patterns, appearing and disappearing intermittently. Senior staff initially dismissed it as minor static, a quirk of polar ionospheric activity, yet its unusual behaviour prompted additional scrutiny. Operators cross-checked frequencies and compared historical radar echoes, confirming that nothing in the system's memory matched this anomalous presence. The blip seemed deliberate, measured, and unnervingly silent, a mystery lingering beyond the reach of established protocols. Alarms sounded briefly when the object entered restricted airspace, and a flurry of communication erupted as launch controllers confirmed readings across multiple monitoring systems. Officers activated contingency procedures, calling for verification from adjacent tracking stations and airborne observation units. Every instrument was scrutinized, and every operator's attention was drawn to the anomaly's movement. Yet despite rigorous protocol, the object remained elusive on all but one display, as though it existed just outside human perception. Its sudden appearance punctuated the routine of a controlled launch operation, casting an unfamiliar tension over an environment normally defined by strict order. The launch sequence was halted mid-count, consoles flickering and hydraulic systems holding the missile in a tense standoff, as personnel followed emergency protocols with disciplined efficiency. Red warning lights illuminated panels, signalling the team to suspend all activity until the object could be identified or cleared. Engineers monitored pressure gauges, fuel lines, and guidance circuitry, prepared to abort the launch entirely if needed. Every command was executed without hesitation, yet the very precision of the suspension underscored the anomaly's power. A single presence had forced the halt of a weapon system designed for unwavering obedience to human command. Additional radar arrays scanned the skies, yet the object refused to appear consistently on any instrument, defying the very systems designed to ensure total situational awareness. Tracking algorithms attempted to reconcile its movements with known aerial dynamics, but no model fit. Observers compared the data with satellite imagery, polar flight logs, and naval patrols, yet all indicated an absence where the blip persisted. The phenomenon seemed to mock the layers of redundancy built into Arctic defense systems, a reminder that even the most sophisticated technology has limits when confronted with the unexplained. In the context of the Cold War, the test's interruption was more than a technical anomaly. It represented a breach, however inexplicable, in a domain thought fully under human control. Arctic missile ranges were chosen for their isolation, designed to minimize exposure to foreign surveillance or environmental interference. Each test represented a high-stakes demonstration of military readiness and technological supremacy. The unexpected presence, therefore, carried both symbolic and practical weight. It challenged assumptions of security, undermined confidence in instruments, and introduced a variable that could not be predicted, measured, or mitigated. Operators and officers exchanged cautious glances, voices measured and clipped, as the tension of uncertainty settled over the normally precise and predictable environment. Their training had prepared them for mechanical failure, weather anomalies, and human error, but not for inexplicable interference from an unknown entity in a sealed airspace. Conversations were precise, deliberate, and technical, revealing professional restraint masking the apprehension that grew quietly with each unverified observation. Even seasoned personnel, accustomed to life in extreme polar conditions, felt the weight of a presence that had no clear explanation. Post-test analysis compiled every instrument reading, observation, and log entry, yet no coherent explanation emerged for the sudden intrusion that had stopped the launch. Technical audits verified the functionality of every radar system, telemetry line, and launch mechanism. All equipment performed within expected parameters. Investigators considered meteorological phenomena, atmospheric reflection, and stray aircraft, but each hypothesis failed to match the evidence. The object remained an outlier, recorded in the logs but absent in physical observation, leaving a gap in understanding that would endure for decades. Documents made public decades later preserve detailed accounts of the procedures and anomalies observed, yet the object's identity and origin remained unexplained. Analysts poring over these accounts recognized the anomaly's significance: a controlled environment disrupted by a presence entirely outside human comprehension. Footnotes reference system checks, launch logs, and cross-station communications, providing the only enduring trace of what occurred. Even with hindsight, the event resisted categorization, leaving scholars, military historians, and aerospace engineers alike to speculate without resolution. For those who study polar missile operations today, the incident remains a cautionary tale of human planning intersecting with forces that refuse to be contained, catalogued, or predicted. Training programs reference the event as a reminder of vulnerability, emphasizing vigilance and the acceptance that unknown variables may intrude even in highly controlled settings. Arctic launches continue to rely on meticulous systems and redundant safeguards, yet the memory of the 1960 interruption endures as a shadow over every subsequent exercise, a subtle reminder that the Arctic skies may conceal more than weather or mechanical failure. And across the frozen expanse of that northern test range, a presence endured that no radar sweep, protocol, or human hand could ever fully account for. The ice tunnel discovered then sealed 1994. During a routine ice-penetrating radar survey, engineers noticed a cavity that did not match any known subglacial formation, its dimensions hinting at something far larger than natural melt channels. The signal appeared faint at first, barely distinguishable from background noise, but repeated sweeps confirmed the anomaly's persistence. Instruments indicated a hollow extending far beneath the surface, and the team quickly realized that their initial mapping had overlooked the possibility of such a structure. The discovery shifted the focus of the expedition instantly, prompting careful recalibration of sensors and meticulous documentation to ensure that no detail of the unexpected void would be lost. The Antarctic's surface stretched endlessly, broken only by ridges and crevasses, each step across the icy plain emphasizing the isolation of the survey team from any outside observer. Winds scoured the frozen landscape, carrying fine ice crystals that stung exposed skin and created mirages across the horizon. Observation towers and temporary research shelters appeared distant, dwarfed by the scale of the surrounding ice sheet. This remoteness made the discovery all the more striking. A cavity of such size beneath terrain that seemed monotonous and uniform suggested the ice had concealed secrets that standard mapping had long missed, hiding them in silence from human view. Advanced ground-penetrating sensors were deployed to measure depth and density, scanning for anomalies and confirming that the structure extended far beneath the frozen crust. Operators meticulously recorded the radar echoes, using multiple passes to reduce the possibility of error. The readings indicated a hollow larger than most subglacial channels, with interior dimensions inconsistent with naturally occurring meltwater cavities. Measurements of surrounding ice density revealed subtle variations, hinting at structural complexities. Every new dataset added to the sense that the ice was guarding something extraordinary, challenging assumptions about the behavior of polar ice sheets and the geophysical processes shaping their hidden landscapes. Initial readings suggested a hollow that was irregular in some places, yet remarkably straight in others, sparking both curiosity and caution among the team. Straight walls within the tunnel contradicted the chaotic patterns expected from natural ice flow or melt channels. Angular sections hinted at either unusual geological forces or a phenomenon beyond conventional understanding. The team debated whether the radar might be producing artifacts, yet repeated scans across multiple angles consistently showed the same unexpected features. The hollow was real, and its geometry defied explanation, leaving scientists with the uneasy realization that they had stumbled upon something entirely unclassified and beyond immediate comprehension. Engineers and geophysicists began compiling measurements, creating preliminary schematics of the tunnel's length, width, and the unexpected symmetry of its interior walls. Each diagram revealed long, continuous passages interspersed with smaller chambers branching off at unusual angles. Depth estimates suggested that the cavity extended hundreds of meters beneath the surface, far deeper than typical ice fissures. Calculations of volume and structural integrity indicated a void that could have held significant space without collapsing. As the team worked through the data, a mix of professional excitement and caution permeated discussions, for the discovery was extraordinary in both scale and character, unlike anything previously documented in polar research. The interior appeared to defy conventional geological expectations, with evidence of smooth surfaces and unusual angular formations that hinted at an unknown process shaping the space. Ice samples extracted near the walls showed compression patterns inconsistent with typical glacial movement. Microfractures suggested stability, yet the straight sections and apparent uniformity implied interventional forces unrecorded in standard glaciology. Every new observation added layers of intrigue, suggesting that the tunnel was neither a typical subglacial channel nor a straightforward result of ice dynamics. The combination of natural and inexplicable features heightened the sense of a mystery lurking just beneath the researchers' instruments. Historical studies of subglacial ice formations offered few comparisons. Natural meltwater channels were typically smaller and irregular, leaving the origin of this cavity unexplained. Past expeditions had documented elongated fissures and hidden lakes, but none matched the scale, straight walls, or internal complexity of this tunnel. The absence of an apparent water source or geothermal activity further distinguished the structure from known formations. By reviewing decades of glaciological research, the team confirmed that the cavity represented an anomaly in both scope and character, challenging the boundaries of polar geology and leaving experts to consider explanations that range from rare natural phenomena to processes yet unobserved in scientific literature. Team members debated the potential risks of further exploration, weighing scientific curiosity against the dangers posed by structural instability and extreme isolation. Climbing into the cavity was impractical, and heavy equipment risked destabilizing ice that might have stood for millennia. Safety protocols dictated a careful balance between gathering information and preserving the integrity of the tunnel. Meanwhile, the psychological weight of discovering something vast, hidden, and unclassified created tension within the group. Discussions oscillated between meticulous documentation and restrained caution, emphasizing the responsibility inherent in encountering a formation that could never be fully predicted or understood from above the ice. Subsequent scans and 3D reconstructions revealed deeper chambers and subtle cavities branching off the main tunnel, suggesting a complexity that exceeded initial estimates. The imaging indicated spaces that widened unexpectedly and then narrowed in ways that seemed almost deliberate. Operators noted faint variations in ice density along the walls, hinting at layers compressed differently from surrounding ice. Each new detail expanded the known extent of the tunnel, reinforcing that the cavity was more than a single anomaly. It was an extensive, interconnected void whose scale challenged expectations. The data deepened the mystery, leaving unanswered questions about both origin and stability. Authorities soon intervened, instructing that the cavity be sealed and the location restricted, citing security and the need for controlled study before any public disclosure. Engineers were ordered to block access points, and detailed notes were classified. Even the most careful documentation for internal use was coded and stored, inaccessible to outside researchers. Decisions were made swiftly, emphasizing safety, secrecy, and the uncertainty inherent in understanding the tunnel's formation. The intervention reinforced the sense that the discovery was extraordinary, too unpredictable to allow full exploration, and that the ice itself had become a guardian of its hidden interior. Official logs and satellite imagery later hinted at the tunnel's presence, though no detailed public record survived, leaving researchers to speculate about what lay beneath the ice. Remote sensing captured subtle anomalies in surface texture and reflectivity, but these were insufficient to reconstruct the full structure. Published maps omitted any reference to the cavity, and discussions in scientific literature remained vague or speculative. The combination of restricted access and incomplete public data left an enduring gap in knowledge, one that underscored the ice's capacity to conceal vast unexplored voids from human understanding, even in an era of advanced technology. For those who studied the surveys, the tunnel remained a haunting reminder that even meticulously mapped ice can conceal vast, unexplored voids whose origins defy explanation. Each expedition that returned to the area encountered only a flat, frozen expanse, giving no hint of the chambers and passageways beneath. The limits of observation, combined with the remote environment and extreme weather, reinforced the notion that some discoveries are meant to remain partially veiled. Curiosity was tempered by the awareness that the ice may hide more than it reveals, preserving secrets for which no current method of inquiry could account. The ice above now appears uniform, yet the cavity beneath endures as a hidden enigma, its origin and purpose still unrevealed. The Arctic Convoy's Shared Visual Contact, 1952. The convoy sliced through sheets of shifting ice, the horizon a stark line where sea and sky blurred, when the first officer aboard the lead vessel spotted an object hovering motionless above the floes. At first, the movement, or lack thereof, seemed impossible, defying the rhythms of wind, current and light. The officer adjusted binoculars, trying to account for optical illusions caused by sun glinting off ice or low-lying clouds. Yet with each scan, the object remained suspended, a silent form above the frozen expanse, and the officer's calls soon summoned other crew members to witness the unexplained phenomenon. Sea spray and freezing winds swept across the decks, reducing visibility and numbing exposed skin, making the crew's reliance on careful observation critical. Ice floes collided and shifted unpredictably, creating groaning sounds that echoed across the water. Each vessel's bow carved through the frozen passages with deliberate care, engines straining against the resistant ice. Amid the harsh conditions, the object remained perfectly still, defying expectations of movement even as gusts rattled rigging and whipped snow across the decks. Its presence, unaltered by the elements, unsettled the experienced sailors who had faced Arctic storms and shifting pack ice for decades. Several icebreakers and supply ships maintained formation, each with a dedicated crew responsible for monitoring position, ice movement, and ensuring constant communication across the Arctic expanse. Officers logged coordinates meticulously, while lookouts scanned the horizon in long, methodical shifts. Radio operators relayed position and weather reports between vessels, reinforcing the tight coordination required to navigate safely. Amid routine vigilance, the anomalous object stood out starkly, a shared reference point that drew attention from multiple decks. Its persistence across different perspectives confirmed that this was no mirage or illusion, but a tangible anomaly in a region thought fully mapped and understood. At first, the anomalous sighting was dismissed as an optical illusion, a trick of low-angle sunlight reflecting off distant ice or the shimmering horizon in Arctic heat gradients. Experienced sailors, accustomed to mirages and looming effects caused by atmospheric distortion, initially urged caution in drawing conclusions. Yet even as skepticism circulated among the crew, the object refused to waver or flicker like a mirage would. It maintained clarity and proportion, consistently appearing in the same location relative to multiple vessels, forcing observers to consider the possibility that what they were seeing was real and wholly inexplicable within conventional maritime experience. Within minutes, officers aboard neighbouring vessels confirmed the presence, reporting the same stationary form suspended against the pale sky. Communications crackled across radio channels as multiple witnesses corroborated the sighting. The object's endurance and stability confounded natural explanations, and logs began noting position, angle and distance from each ship. Even with varying vantage points and conditions, all observers described a shape that appeared solid and stationary. The unusual consensus among experienced sailors, who were trained to detect both danger and illusion, lent credibility to an event that would otherwise have been dismissed as individual misperception. The object's shape and scale were unlike anything the sailors had previously encountered, hovering silently and unchanging, with edges that seemed sharply defined despite the hazy conditions. It lacked the flicker or wavering common to floating ice or optical anomalies, maintaining a precise outline against the diffuse Arctic light. Crew members compared notes on appearance. Some described it as a geometric form, others as a low-hanging, luminous shape, yet all agreed on its unyielding stillness. The anomaly resisted categorization, confounding attempts to assign it to any known natural or man-made object in polar waters. Light scattered across the icy expanse played across the anomaly's surface, yet the usual distortions from mirages or atmospheric refraction could not account for its stability or coherence. Sunlight struck drifting snow and ice differently depending on angle, yet the object did not shimmer, bend or shift as surrounding surfaces did. Its visual persistence under such conditions reinforced the growing impression that this was neither illusion nor familiar atmospheric phenomenon. Observers noted the subtle interaction of light without alteration to the object's form, deepening the sense of the unexplained in an environment already defined by extremes. Crew members murmured quietly on the decks, some skeptical, some fearful, as captains and officers attempted to reconcile training with the evidence of multiple eyewitnesses. The anomaly became the focus of tense discussion, yet professional discipline kept speculation in check. Navigators checked instruments for consistency, while officers reviewed the convoy's course and environmental readings. Despite every rational effort, the object's continued presence introduced an undeniable tension. Even the most seasoned mariners acknowledged that what they saw fell outside the bounds of experience, creating a quiet apprehension that lingered even as ice cracked and groaned around the ships. Gradually, the object began to fade from view, not by movement but by disappearing into the diffuse horizon, leaving no wake, shadow or radar signature behind. Crew members squinted and adjusted binoculars, hoping to catch a last glimpse, but it simply dissipated, leaving only the frozen sea and low clouds. The fading was subtle, almost imperceptible, as if the Arctic itself had reclaimed the anomaly. Once observers could no longer distinguish its edges, the object became a memory shared among all on deck, an event as untraceable as it was undeniable. Official logs captured precise times, bearings, and angles of observation, with every vessel's entry corroborating the others, creating an unusually thorough record for an incident that defied explanation. Officers meticulously noted details in navigation and operational reports, preserving a paper trail that future historians would examine. These records emphasized observation rather than interpretation, highlighting facts without speculation. The consistent documentation reinforced the credibility of the encounter, leaving no room for misremembered events or isolated hallucinations. For analysts reviewing the logs decades later, the collective nature of the sighting remained extraordinary and perplexing. Historians reviewing the event later noted that the convoy's collective account remained consistent, raising questions about perception, memory, and the possibility of phenomena beyond conventional maritime experience. The Arctic, a region of extremes, already challenges human senses, yet this incident suggested something that could not be fully explained by environmental distortion. Experts debated whether unique light conditions, psychological effects, or atmospheric anomalies could account for the experience, yet no hypothesis fully reconciled with the consistency across multiple witnesses and vessels. The shared memory persisted as an enduring enigma, a mystery preserved in records and oral accounts. For those who sailed the Arctic that winter, the silent encounter became part of the environment's lore, a shared enigma that could not be measured, traced, or fully understood. In quiet moments, crew members would recall the hovering shape, describing it in tones of awe and uncertainty. Even years later, the story circulated among Arctic mariners, a reminder of how the region can reveal phenomena that defy expectation. The anomaly's fleeting presence contrasted sharply with the permanence of ice and the routine of navigation, leaving a subtle imprint on those who witnessed it, as enduring as the polar landscape itself. On the frozen horizon, the memory of that motionless, luminous shape lingers in the minds of all who saw it, as intangible and drifting as the Arctic ice itself. The Antarctic recon film that was reclassified 1971. Cameras clicked steadily in the cabin as the crew traced their planned route over the Antarctic expanse, unaware that something entirely unanticipated had entered their field of view. Initially, the flight seemed routine, surveying ice formations, mapping crevasses, and monitoring seasonal changes to update charts that would aid scientific and navigational efforts. Yet as the hours passed, a subtle irregularity appeared on the horizon, distinct from the expected patterns of ice and snow. What was first dismissed as a shadow or atmospheric distortion soon revealed itself with unnerving clarity in the viewfinder, prompting a shift in attention from routine documentation to urgent observation. The mission had been meticulously planned, each segment plotted to maximize coverage and minimize fuel consumption over a remote, inhospitable environment. Meteorological data had been gathered in advance to predict wind shifts and visibility, while the aircraft's onboard instruments recorded temperature, barometric pressure, and altitude. Photographic equipment, carefully calibrated for both black and white and colour film, was expected to document nothing more extraordinary than ice ridges, occasional meltwater channels, and snowdrifts. Yet amid these familiar targets, the anomaly appeared as a sharp, impossible contrast to the uniform whiteness below. A tight-knit crew of navigators, photographers, and flight engineers monitored instruments and film reels, their focus split between maintaining course and capturing high-resolution imagery. Each member understood the hazards of flying over Antarctica: sudden storms, hidden crevasses, and magnetic interference that could affect navigation. The anomaly drew the attention of everyone on board, creating an uneasy silence punctuated only by the mechanical whir of camera shutters. Discussions, normally technical and precise, turned hesitant as the crew confronted the inexplicable, realizing that standard protocols could not account for what their eyes and lenses were capturing. Through the haze and drifting ice crystals, one photographer noted an unusual glimmer, a form that seemed to hover over the terrain with an almost deliberate stillness. It resisted all attempts at visual categorization. No conventional aircraft, weather balloon, or reflective ice formation could explain the steady outline. Binoculars were trained and cameras refocused, yet the object maintained its position with an unyielding precision that challenged both expectation and experience. The crew exchanged glances, each silently acknowledging that the event before them was beyond the ordinary scope of Antarctic reconnaissance. The cameras whirred to life as officers urged rapid documentation, shutters clicking in succession to capture every possible frame. Time seemed to slow as each roll of film recorded an image that appeared fixed against the vast, shifting backdrop of ice and cloud. Adjustments were made to compensate for glare and low contrast, the photographic team working under the pressure of preserving evidence that could vanish in an instant. Every frame became a potential clue, yet each also amplified the sense of unreality. The object did not waver, shimmer, or shift as natural phenomena typically would under similar conditions. Film analysis later revealed a shape that defied easy description, geometrical in some frames and almost amorphous in others, luminous against the muted landscape below. Its behaviour was inconsistent with aircraft or known atmospheric effects. It remained stationary despite wind patterns, and light interacting with it did not produce the reflections expected from snow, ice, or metal. Technicians and photographers reviewed the footage frame by frame, attempting to measure angles, scale, and relative motion, yet each measurement raised further questions rather than providing answers. The Antarctic light was mercurial, changing from muted grey to brilliant glare within minutes, yet the anomaly remained constant. Shifting clouds and drifting snowflakes obscured portions of the landscape, creating contrast that made ordinary features flicker or disappear, yet the object persisted with an almost unnatural solidity. The crew realized that environmental factors, usually relied upon to interpret ambiguous sightings, offered no explanation. Every attempt to rationalize the phenomenon using standard meteorological or optical principles failed, leaving only the stark reality of what their cameras had recorded. Murmurs spread through the cabin as crew members discussed the possibilities in hushed tones, balancing professional caution with awe. Could this be an optical trick, an undiscovered natural phenomenon, or something entirely unclassified? Experienced navigators and photographers, trained to question visual inconsistencies, struggled to reconcile the footage with their knowledge. Conversations shifted between technical analysis and speculation, yet all participants understood that the anomaly's presence challenged their assumptions about both the Antarctic environment and the limitations of human observation. Subsequent frame-by-frame review in the aircraft's darkroom intensified the crew's uncertainty. Each photograph was examined under magnification, angles calculated, and scale estimated using known landmarks and the aircraft's telemetry. Yet the results only reinforced the mystery. The object appeared in consistent locations relative to the ice below and exhibited characteristics that no natural or man-made explanation could fully accommodate. Attempts to align it with flight path, light conditions, or weather data produced more questions than solutions, solidifying its status as an unexplained encounter. Command headquarters was promptly notified, and intervention followed quickly. Orders were issued to secure the film and limit access, citing both operational security and the anomalous nature of the imagery. Only a small number of officers and technical staff were permitted to review the footage, while the remainder of the mission proceeded with standard survey operations. The anomaly's presence, coupled with the need to maintain mission integrity, elevated the incident from an oddity to a matter requiring controlled oversight and documentation, emphasizing the unusual significance of what had been captured. Internal memos and mission logs stressed the strict protocols for handling the film, highlighting both its sensitive content and the potential implications for broader scientific and military understanding. Copies were restricted, and references to the incident were deliberately vague to avoid inadvertent disclosure. Researchers outside the immediate team were left unaware of the anomaly, with speculation confined to those with direct knowledge. Over time, the incident became a carefully guarded secret, noted only in select archives that remained inaccessible to the public or wider academic community. For those who handled the footage, the images remained a source of both fascination and unease. Scholars, pilots, and reconnaissance specialists who had seen the film spoke cautiously, aware that the anomaly existed in recorded reality, yet refused to conform to expectation. Its presence in archive footage suggested a phenomenon that was at once observable and inexplicable, recorded in meticulous detail yet shrouded in mystery. The Antarctic skies, already a realm of extremes, had produced an occurrence that would endure as an enigmatic record, unseen by the world but deeply imprinted on those who witnessed it. The film was stored away, but its images, frozen glimpses of something unidentifiable above the ice, continue to haunt the minds of those who know of its existence. The last entry from Station Zulu, 1966. Station Zulu stood isolated at the edge of Antarctica, a cluster of modest buildings surrounded by an endless, desolate expanse that tested both endurance and morale. The outpost had been constructed to monitor weather patterns, track ice movement, and support scientific research, yet its remote location meant that even routine operations carried inherent risks. Communication with the outside world relied on intermittent radio transmissions, vulnerable to static, solar interference, and the relentless storms that swept across the Antarctic plateau. For the crew stationed there, each day was defined by a blend of meticulous observation and the uneasy awareness that they were utterly alone in a harsh, unyielding environment. The station's mission in 1966 was straightforward yet demanding. Crew members were responsible for maintaining meteorological instruments, conducting geological surveys, and observing wildlife in the surrounding region. Data was transmitted to central research hubs, forming part of larger global studies on climate and polar activity. Despite the seeming ordinariness of these tasks, the isolation and monotony of life at Station Zulu imposed a psychological strain that could make even minor anomalies feel significant. Routine became a protective structure, yet it could not shield the personnel from the strangeness that would soon intrude upon their observations. Inside the station, every crew member followed strict schedules. Equipment checks, log entries, and routine maintenance were performed with military precision, designed both to protect instruments from the harsh conditions and to sustain the mental focus of personnel. Shared meals, brief periods of rest, and rotating watch duties created a fragile sense of normalcy, yet a constant tension lingered beneath the surface. The crew were trained to record and report irregularities, but no preparation could have anticipated the series of events that would escalate into their final, chilling encounter. The Antarctic environment tested every measure of human endurance. Temperatures fluctuated unpredictably. Gusts of wind could appear without warning, and visibility often dropped to near zero in a matter of minutes. The vastness of the surrounding terrain amplified the sense of isolation. Even familiar landmarks seemed alien under the relentless polar sun or the shifting grey of overcast skies. It was against this backdrop of extreme conditions that the first subtle signs of unusual activity began to emerge, easily overlooked at first but steadily growing in frequency and intensity. Initial anomalies were subtle. Footprints in freshly fallen snow that led nowhere, strange reflections on distant equipment, and fleeting shadows that seemed to move against prevailing wind patterns. Crew members debated whether these occurrences were natural, caused by shifting ice, drifting snow, or optical effects, or whether they indicated something else entirely. Each anomaly was meticulously logged, photographs were taken when possible, and instruments were calibrated to eliminate error, yet the irregularities persisted, challenging rational explanation and seeding growing unease among the station personnel. As days progressed, the unexplained activity intensified. Unidentified lights appeared just beyond the perimeter during periods of low visibility, and faint sounds, whistling, tapping, or distant mechanical hums echoed across the station compound. The crew attempted to rationalize these experiences, attributing them to weather phenomena, equipment malfunctions, or distant supply flights, but none of these explanations fully accounted for the consistency and timing of the occurrences. Even seasoned researchers found themselves questioning their own perceptions, aware that prolonged isolation could exacerbate fear and misinterpretation. The crew responded methodically, recording every detail in official logs and attempting to cross-reference observations with instruments. Thermometers, barometers, and magnetic sensors were scrutinized for irregular readings, watches were doubled during night shifts, and patrols were extended along the perimeter to detect any potential intrusions. Despite these precautions, the anomalies continued without clear cause, leaving the personnel in a state of heightened vigilance that blurred the boundary between routine duty and anxious anticipation. Electronic and monitoring equipment intermittently registered data that could not be explained. Radar blips appeared without source, temperature gauges fluctuated briefly in localized patches, and magnetic instruments detected deviations that lacked any conventional origin. These technical anomalies, combined with the visual and auditory disturbances, compounded the psychological tension within the station. Personnel noted each irregularity in their logs, aware that documentation was both a scientific imperative and a form of self-preservation in an environment that could feel indifferent, even hostile to human presence. Isolation magnified the sense of vulnerability. Crew members found that the relentless monotony of daily tasks made every minor anomaly seem significant, every creaking panel or gust of wind potentially portentous. Discussions often circled back to the same questions. Was this natural, a product of environmental extremes, or something else entirely? Anxiety and curiosity intertwined, sharpening awareness but also fraying nerves as the team struggled to reconcile their professional training with the unexplainable phenomena occurring just beyond the station walls. The final log entry, scrawled hastily on a worn page, reflected the culmination of mounting tension. It spoke in fragmented phrases of activity observed beyond the perimeter, of instruments behaving unpredictably, and of a sense of being watched. The writing was abrupt, marked by omissions and interrupted thoughts, yet it conveyed a palpable unease and the recognition that something extraordinary had occurred. No subsequent entries were made, leaving the log as a singular record of what the crew experienced in those final days. When a later team arrived to relieve Station Zulu, the station appeared intact yet eerily abandoned. Instruments were operational, provisions remained untouched, and there was no sign of struggle or departure. The absence of personnel contrasted starkly with the meticulous condition of the station, leaving those who arrived with questions that could not be answered through observation alone. Logs, instruments, and recordings were preserved, but they offered only fragments of explanation, suggesting that the events had been real yet entirely beyond conventional understanding. Researchers and historians reviewing Station Zulu's records have continued to speculate on the nature of the last entry. Some attribute the anomalies to extreme environmental conditions, optical illusions, or human error under prolonged isolation. Others suggest more enigmatic explanations, noting the precision and consistency of instrument readings and the detailed documentation maintained by the crew. Whatever the truth, the outpost remains a symbol of human vulnerability at the edge of the world, a reminder that even meticulously trained personnel can encounter phenomena that defy expectation and understanding. The last words written in Station Zulu's log remain sealed in history, a brief echo of something that watched and waited beyond the frozen perimeter,